starting there. Oh shit, right, that's me. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. It'll be great. Okay. What's up, everybody? It's your
It's your pal? Are you going to say it's your pal?
I was going to say it's your bitch.
It's your Well, if you think we're cutting any of this, you're dead wrong. That's what I'm happy to report.
Oh, we can leave it for the video, but all right, let's just don't say it's your bitch. See, I felt like if I said it's ya bitch, for some reason that made it more friendly. Okay, we're taking bitch right out of it. God, it's a weird day. It's a weird day.
You're telling me.
It's fine. Oh. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of What the Fuck is Our... No, it's fine.
What's amazing is this is the third time you've done this, and you've never struggled this hard.
It's already been a long day, and my brain is...
Oh, you're telling me.
My brain is not existing. Okay. Well, this is a real treat for the video watchers.
Yeah.
You're welcome. No. Okay. Oh, Jesus. Now I'm throwing my computer around. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails, Famous Fatalities Edition. I am your host, Christy Oxborough, and with me, as always, the light of my life, the woman who can do no wrong, Lauren Ash. How you doing?
I've reached a level I have never reached before. This is the latest we have ever started a record. I should just go on record as saying, and the reason is 100% because I am the one researching this week, and I needed until now. I thought I could have been done about 2 hours ago, and as Christy and I said a couple minutes ago, you never stop. You don't stop. I was like, I'm done. You're never done. Because just tonight at the 11th hour, I found something and I was like, good God. So long story short, as I was compiling these notes, there was pieces of it I didn't even proofread or check. I was just like, copy, paste, print. Like, so it's buckle in, everybody, because it's going to be a wild ride. Oh boy.
Oh, I mean, anybody that is watching the unedited Zoom video of this has already realized it's already been a journey.
Yeah.
Because normally we've only, done a switcheroo a few times now.
Yeah.
And I always made notes for that. The first one, I was very nervous. I wrote down exactly what I should say so I could just read it because I knew I'd be too nervous. The next time I just gave myself little notes to run with. This week, I thought this cocky bitch came in and went, no notes. I'm going to do it on the fly. So my opener was my third try. Just mentally, I don't know where I'm at. It's fine. It's going to be great. We're all here having a great time. And if everyone hasn't noticed already, we switched places.
We did.
Because tonight, I'm going to say, is our first of what we hope are many of our serial killer episodes. We mentioned it somewhere. Did we mention it last week in the episode?
We did, yes, because we were teasing that the next episode was going to be the first of our serial killer series.
I mean,
I think
that feels like a month ago.
I've lived 10 lives since we recorded that. Honest to God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you think you just sit down, you record for a couple hours, and then a week later, you do the same thing. But dear listeners, once you get in a case, you don't really get out, so you're mentally drowning for about a week. And then you have to try and get all the information out in a 2-hour span. And then it's a very quick, well, time to get that out of your brain because you need room for the next time you drown. And then you drown for another whole week. So it just kind of feels like it doesn't stop. Could not love this more, but that's just we're getting our sea legs still. Is that sea legs are a thing,
I think
right?
so. I think for me also, it was that I had kind of pieced out my time. I had scheduled my time for this week very, very precisely. And then I had a few things come up, which are great and exciting. But it just torpedoed the whole week, and every kind, my very delicate schedule got trashed. And so, I was just left with less time later in the week than I thought I would have, less time overall than I thought I would have. And if people think that means I under researched, they can go suck an egg. Because believe you me, I am bringing the goods. I promise that. But yeah, it was frantic. It was frantic for sure. The past few hours have been frantic. When Christy texted me at 7:45 and said, we can do another day, I realized, I told her we were going to start at 7:30. Long story short, at 9:15 we logged on. So we're doing our best.
Yeah, we're doing great.
We're doing great.
We're informing people. Well, this week you're informing people. I'm just gonna try and get my way through this with as few edits for our dear editor as possible.
Bless you.
I apologize in advance. I know he's already had to cut the opening bit.
That is not if I have anything to do with it. But yes, of course.
Something else that I know that we are that we do every week, because I'm here every week, so I know things. I know that we each have a cocktail, and tonight is a special cocktail because we are drinking the same thing, even though we are apart. Why don't you tell the people what you're drinking?
Ladies, gentlemen, people of all kinds, we have gotten our first official sponsor of the show, liquor sponsor. And it is called Baron Jaeger. And this is a honey liqueur. And they sent us a bottle when Christy was here. We're not going to get into how she got some home with her to Canada, but it's neither near nor there. But we have created a cocktail with the Baron Jaeger that I would highly recommend. This is a shot of the Baron Jaeger. It is lemonade. It is fresh lime. And then just a topper of Prosecco. Because as everyone knows who listens to this show, every cocktail I put a topper or a floater of Prosecco in. And let me tell you a little something. I'm going to give it a little go here. I'm assuming it's good. I love that I talked it up before I've even tried it. Oh, listen. I never think about putting honey in cocktails. And when I think about honey in cocktails, I think about like Manhattans or old fashions, something where it's very boozy and feels warm and that sweetness is nice. And this would be delicious in any kind of like booze forward cocktail for sure. But on its own, it's just like a little sweet kiss. Just a little of that, a lemon honey kiss. I can't recommend this more. Now, you made the same thing over there. Why don't you give it a go?
I did without the Prosecco. I'm not as...
Of course. I just have it flowing in this house all the time.
And I mean, I probably did more lime than anything because, as we've learned, I have a slight addiction to lime. Can you?
She loves
I do.
It. Mm-hmm.
That's nice.
It's nice, right?
It's a refresh.
It's
nice.
Refresh.
It's a nice like summer night sitting outside,
Absolutely. I love it. So listen, thank you to the people at Baron Jaeger sending us some goods. Much appreciated. Oh, I'm going to need it.
Yeah.
I'm going to need it.
It's always stressful, I think, on both of us when we switch places. This, as we've mentioned, is not the first time that we have switched places on the show.
Right.
But it's also not the first time that we have mentally switched places in real life.
Yeah.
There was a time, I don't recall a year, I want to say like a 2007, or
it would have been It could have been. It would have been between 2005 and 2007,
Okay.
somewhere in that range for sure.
I took a little flight out and met Lauren in lovely Toronto, Ontario.
Thank you.
We went to a tour called Taste of Chaos.
We sure did.
Now, what's Taste of Chaos? You're asking. Some people are screaming at us. I was at that show. That would be very cool if you're at that show. If you're at that show, let us know. It was just this lovely concert, almost festival like. I think our main draw there was The Used.
It was
There was also 30 Seconds to Mars.
also a draw for us.
Yes. That was the day I think we felt more elderly at a concert than ever before, because we had like young girls coming up to us, asking us basic things like, where are the bathrooms? Where can you find food? Do you have a tampon? Like all of these things that are just like, wow, coming right to us. Well,
Concert mothers. Yep.
always.
And I love that at like 23, like still so young, 22, 23, but we were the elderly ones there for sure. Wasn't that also
100%.
the concert where you said to me, and I quote, well, I guess it's going to be pizza if you want a decent meal?
It is.
Yeah.
That was also the show where I had a gentleman walk up to me and ask if I'd like an awesome high five or something. I
That's
don't know if
right.
awesome was the word he used. But it was like, do I want this high five? And it was really hyped up. And I went, okay. And the point is, we ended up taking a picture of my hand because it got so red because he whipped my hand with his hand. It was painful. It
He
was
hit
not
it too hard.
was
And I
not-
don't understand what that was.
It wasn't awesome. It wasn't epic. It wasn't a way to meet the ladies because we turned around and walked away.
Yeah, we were like, what a creep.
Yeah. But we had an opportunity at this concert to meet a famous person. Now, because I'm trying to drag out the famous person part, because this is one of my favorite stories of us to ever exist.
Yeah.
So, as some may have noticed or have heard over the last several months of our podcast, I am not the best when it comes to meeting celebrities, particularly male celebrities who just happen to be breathtakingly beautiful. Now, we all know, even people who's this is their first time listening to our podcast, they know how I reacted to meeting Jared Padalecki, full silent scream.
Yeah.
So this is who I am. I'm not the best about meeting beautiful male celebrities. However, we kind of took a bit of a switcheroo that evening. Would you like to tell the people about it?
Yeah, I would. All right. So they had scheduled this thing so that when the Used was about to go on stage, that's when 30 Seconds to Mars was doing their autograph signing. So it was kind of like you had to choose, which I think is kind of shitty, but we kind of got it in our heads that it was like, if we get in the 30 Seconds to Mars signing line early, then we can get an autograph and then get to the stage for the Used show. So we were like, I think second or third in line for these autographs from 30 Seconds to Mars. Now, for those who don't know, the lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars is a very famous actor. And that actor is Jordan Catalano himself, Jared Leto.
Yeah.
So there was so many things that were so interesting. Like when they find, like, we'll get to that in a second. Like I remember that they were all wearing like surgical gloves, like rubber gloves. They also wouldn't sign their names. They each signed a symbol. Yeah, I remember these things. It was, I guess their band thing. Anyway, so we're in this line and we're ready for the band to come out. And we know that Jared Leto is about to come out. And so I turn to Christy and I say, Christy, look, they're just people. Okay. They're just people. And I know that you're going to get excited, but I just want to remind you that he's just a person. He's just a person, right? Wasn't that along the lines of my pep talk?
It was very much because I was freaking out and I was like, I can't do this. Oh my God. And you were like, It's going to be fine. Just relax. He's just a person. It's fine.
And
Was
then
it
he came
fine?
out. He came out. I turned, and literally this force greater than me from within. I screamed like a banshee. I literally was like, ah! Like I don't know. I haven't seen her before and I haven't seen her since. But what I'd like to think is that was a little bit of Blanche in me.
100%. I
I
think she's in all of
screamed.
us.
Oh, she is. I screamed so loudly though. And then we both, I believe, burst into laughter like immediately because it was just like, what happened? Like I was the cool one. I was the like, oh, it's fine. They're just people, whatever. Oh my God. Like it was bigger than me.
Yeah. It again is one of my favorite stories of us of all time because it was such a beautiful thing to go from me being like, oof, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. And you being like, it's fine. He's just a person. Like it was, and it was the loudest scream.
Oh,
and
it was
full freaking out to the point where I just like it snapped me into reality and I turned into Lauren. It's fine. He's just a person.
Yeah,
like,
it really did. It really did.
I was so cool to meet him. Was like, put the thing down. He autographs it. And I was like, that was a really great show. Thank you so much. Like we had a moment and it was like, and I was cool with it. I was just like, yep. Because we always have to balance each other out. We know if one of us is freaking out, the other has to just lower their level.
Yep.
So that together we're tolerable.
It's really a coping mechanism. That's what we've learned over the years is that you got to get in balance, get in sync, or it's all going to fall apart. Yeah, I think I did manage to pull it together until we walked over, and when I think I also said something about like thank you for a great show or something, and I do remember catching eyes with the Leto.
Yes. Well, you also tried, we're trying to take pictures of him, but like nonchalantly. But this was like, this was like back in the day of like those little cardboard disposable cameras. So it's like, you're going to get a flash. He's going to know. And my favorite is a photo where he's sitting in the background looking beautiful. And I'm in the front looking very like deer in headlights, like what's going on. It's a horrific picture of me, but I think a great picture of him, if I remember correctly. I don't know.
I couldn't make it look like I was taking a picture of him. I had to make it look like I was taking a picture of you.
Yeah, well, you did. You took a picture of both. and I'm sure we'll find it and we'll share it with the people on Instagram at True Crime and Cocktails and probably at Facebook at True Crime and Cocktails and maybe just for our good friends at Twitter at Not Detectives. Check it out.
Smooth as silk.
Again, just kind of wetting my pants because I don't have a safety net and I'm scared.
Oh, don't worry, baby. Because once we get into this, it's just going to be all yippa yappa from this one.
I can't wait. I've got a pen. I'm ready to take notes. I have a note that says we need to jump into it because there's a lot of information.
I have a question and you might not know the answer.
Oh boy.
In the Army Hammer episode, when I told you how many pages I had and you said that's obscene.
Yes.
Do you remember how many pages it was?
I do, because it's the ultimate answer to everything, 42.
Thank you very much.
That was good news. That was a shout out to Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah. Good news. This one, only 34.
Still obscene.
It's obscene. Lot, yeah. I know, but listen, I'll skim as I go. I'll edit on the fly.
It'll be.
It's gonna be. I'm hovering over my own body. That's the level of energy I'm at right now. Like I'm just. I don't know.
The true joke is, I guarantee when this episode is done, just out of our brains, like we're not gonna remember, and it's gonna air, and people are gonna. It's gonna air. It's gonna release. And then people are going to comment on it and we're going to be like, nothing.
Yeah.
Mentally, nothing. Because when we get that certain level of energy, As soon as it's done, we're exhausted and we don't
It
remember a thing.
goes. It's just gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
All
better
right.
that way, like childbirth, right?
You don't forget. I mean,
Excusez-moi. Excusez-moi.
in my defense, I had 3 C-sections.
Oh.
And the first one, they gave me too much. They gave me too high a level of drugs. So they had to make me wait for a specific, like for an extra 2 hours before I could have another dose. So I laid there waiting because they gave me too much during the surgery or something like that. And they told me a time. And I remember watching the clock tick by for the hour and whatever I had to wait until I could have more because it was just intense pain. My second one, I don't remember specifically. I remember pain. That one I was out. I couldn't walk for like 6 weeks because they cut too deep onto the sides of my body where they shouldn't have gone. They made way too wide of a cut. And then the third one, it was a lot of pain because there was, well, dear listeners, I'm going to get blunt with you. There was a lot of gas trapped inside. And let me tell you, that sounds hilarious and jovial. It is so physically painful to have air blocked in your body to the point where the nurses panicked and like called the doctor late at night because I was convinced I was dying. I thought it was a blood clot. I thought this was it. I said goodbye to my husband. I told him how much I loved him. I told him, like, I think this is it. I think something's wrong. This is not right. And so I went through this whole thing and I was like, take care of, to tell the kids that I love them, whatever. If this is it, having this baby was worth it. Like, I went above and beyond. And then a nurse came in who was a very seasoned professional. She came in and went, you just had a C-section, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, could it be just like gas or something? And I was like, oh no, this is intense. And then she like starts flipping through my chart and she's like, oh my God, how did nobody pick this up? It's gas. Which again, hilarious, but so painful. And yeah, they also, that one, I had my youngest just days before my birthday. It wasn't a planned thing. We planned to have another one. We didn't plan when it happened. And so I was adamant that I was not going to be in a hospital on my birthday. I was wrong. So I pushed and pushed and pushed. And every time my doctor would come in, I'd be like, yeah, ready to leave whenever you want. And he was like, I don't know. And then he finally agreed to let me go home the night before my birthday. And I laid there in bed at home. And my husband was like, oh, you're rolling around a lot. Are you okay? And I went, I should not be here.
I have pushed this too far.
Yeah. Needless to say, I should have been at the hospital with the appropriate medications and not at home. What did I gain? The answer is nothing, but neither here nor there. Always a personal journey on True Crime and Cocktails, which if you saw the video opener, I literally forgot what it was called. I eat, breathe, and sleep this show. But in that moment, when it was counting on me, I forgot what it was called. I also tried to introduce myself instead of calling myself the host. I tried to call myself ya bitch. So it is.
This is the hardest I've laughed on the show in a while. Oh, it feels good.
Well,
I feel alive again.
Well, heads up. There's plenty of more where that came from. This mess is not going anywhere.
Nope.
All right.
All right.
Are we ready?
Do it.
Summary.
Roll it out.
All right. In 2010, after 25 years of murders, the grim sleeper, aka Lonnie Franklin Jr., was finally arrested. Though he was convicted of killing 10 women, some believe he may have actually killed over 100 women during that time. So how did he manage to avoid getting caught for that long? Was he just smarter than the cops? Or were the victims, mostly young Black sex workers and drug addicts, simply not a priority for the police? I already have so many questions.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait. Where do you want to start?
Well, first, I want to start by giving a quick shout out to my friend, Carla Renata. I was doing her podcast, the YouTube show, I guess I should call it, called The Curvy Critic with Carla Renata. And we were going to talk. She knows that we have a true crime podcast. And so she had suggested, have you seen these true crime things? And one of the things she suggested was this documentary, The Tales of the Grim Sleeper. And I, again, as a serial killer, whatever, encyclopedia. I don't know. I don't like to say fan because I'm not a fan. Aficionado.
Yeah.
That feels, well, we'll work on it. I also don't want to say expert. I'm too Canadian, but it feels braggadocious. But anyway, as a serial killer knower, how about that? I had not heard of the Grim Sleeper. And so then I watched this documentary and I texted Christy right away. And I was like, I know that we don't usually do solved cases, but I really feel passionately that we need to talk about this on the podcast. Then we made the decision to do a serial killer specials featured by Lauren Ash. And so this fit in perfectly. I was so glad to do this as our first official one. Obviously, I talked about Richard Ramirez before, but this is our first inaugural serial killer special. And there are some things that are unknown still, some unsolved kind of details. So I feel like it still kind of fits into our MO, which is great.
I don't think you have to justify anything.
Thank you very much.
The people were like, hey, we want more serial killers. And guess what? You're delivering.
We did get requests to do an entire season on serial killers. And we thought, why not break it up? Because I really am into this stuff. Yeah. And so, every few episodes, there'll be a serial killer special. Here we go. Number 1, The Grim Sleeper. So Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born August 30th, 1952. His mother, Ruby, was described as strong-willed. She was a former beauty school student from Texas. His father, Lonnie Sr., was a laid-back longshoreman. There's not a lot of information I could find about his childhood. There's not a lot out there. But the one thing that was of note that I did find was not long before he was born. Now, there is a little bit of kind of vagueness about what the exact date was, but it was said that his parents were in a head-on collision, very serious car accident, and it threw his mother from the car. It was so serious, this is graphic, doctors had to reattach his mother's left ankle. And foot. So the dates were not confirmed, but it was said in the one thing that I read that this happened just before he was born, which made me wonder if she was pregnant at the time with him, in which case my question is, because I've already got my psychiatrist hat on, could potential fetal trauma cause brain development issues like lack of empathy, lack of feeling, as we are known to know perhaps are a trait in most serial killers? More on that later. So they lived in South Central LA with Lonnie Jr.'s younger sister, Patricia. She was 5 years younger than him. His older half-brother, Otis, who was Ruby's son from a prior relationship, lived in Texas with relatives, but he did visit in the summers in LA. Lonnie was known to be a sick child. He always had a perpetual cold. He was plagued by debilitating migraines that left him often throwing up and having to lay still and alone in darkened rooms. These subsided in his early 40s, but as an adult, he did suffer from bleeding ulcers. I thought, that was very interesting when you're painting the picture. So young Lonnie was not a great student. He struggled with reading and writing. When he was in the 5th grade, his mom hired a college tutor to help him, but it didn't seem to do any good. He struggled in high school as well until he transferred to Dominguez High School in Compton, which had a work-study program. So he went to school in the morning and he had a job in the afternoon. While he wasn't book smart, he was truly gifted at fixing cars. He also found this as a great way to impress teenage girls and tough guys alike. His dad apparently taught him to drive at age 7. And at age 14, got him his first car and did allow him to drive it around the neighborhood at age 14 without a license.
Well, I mean, by then he'd been driving half his life.
You raise a great point. As a kid, he was described as a fast talker and a flirt. He lost his virginity at age 14 to a girl named Kate. They dated for around a year. Then in ninth grade, he dated a girl named Shannon who moved away to another state at the end of that school year. Lonnie told people that she had his baby, but it is unclear whether or not that's true. And if it was true, it is very unclear whether he had anything to do with that child. So also interesting, is this a lie? Why lie? Lots of things.
I'm already like, okay, so let me get this straight. He got a car at 14 and also lost his virginity at 14. So therefore, my son will never have a car.
That is the correct math. Yes.
Okay. I say that as someone whose oldest is a driver. Yeah. So, and the term car has flown around the house and I've gone, nah. And my husband's like, well, just get him a piece of crap. That's what you do when you're that age. I'm like, is it?
You don't want to know what I was doing in boys' piece of crap cars.
That is why I'm just, you know what? I wrote down lost virginity at 14, had a car at 14, and I'm going to circle it and just leave these notes laying around the house for my husband to find. let him do his own, you know.
He'll put 1 and 2 together.
He will. I have faith in that.
2 and 2 together is the expression.
Yep, I know.
That's another bag of worms.
Oh, see, I like you go for it on the day we're wearing the shirts. Come on.
Feels right.
Yep.
Okay. So it said he also dated a girl named Rachel through 11th and 12th grades. I found nothing else out about that. Now, around age 16, he was arrested twice for grand theft auto. Then he was arrested the next year for burglary. Then he was expelled from high school for getting into a fight with a classmate 2 weeks before graduating. His dad suggested that he join the military, and so a month before he turned 19, he joined the Army. After basic training in January 1972, he was deployed overseas to Germany. He was stationed at the 71st Air Defense Artillery at the Kelly Barracks in Stuttgart, Germany. Now, are you ready for something that's not in the documentaries?
I mean, always. And also, this is another moment just to be like, just so you know, folks, our agreement, which started as a joke and has just turned into how we do this, is when she researches, I don't watch the documentary, so I know nothing going into it. So it's all going to be new to me.
I just like trying to get good reactions from her. She likes getting those from me too, though. So that I feel like that's mutual. But this, I'm like, I just want her to be completely blind. And this, though, I cannot believe, dear listeners, that this is not in. I watched 2 documentaries. They're great, but I can't believe that neither of them covered this.
Well,
that's why we here.
That's why we have this show, and that's why we have you.
Thank you very much. Yep. So April 17th, 1974, around 12:30 a.m., a girl named Ingrid W., her last name has been held to keep her privacy.
Yeah.
She was 17 at the time. She left her boyfriend's house and was walking towards the train station when 3 U.S. Army soldiers pulled up alongside her in a Fiat. 2 of them stepped out of the car to ask her for directions. She was more than happy to help if she could, but before she could answer, one of the men grabbed her by the shoulders, pushed her into the backseat of the car, and piled in on her. One of them had a butcher knife to her throat. He said, "I'll kill you." And even though she did not speak much English, she said she knew what he meant. Now, I'm going to give a bit of a trigger warning here. This is a sexual assault trigger warning. They pulled into an empty field, told her to undress, and took turns raping her. They cut her stomach with the knife, and one of them photographed her, as well as photographing the others having sex with her. She didn't fight, as she said she felt being compliant may save her life. The assault went on until dawn. So keep in mind that they picked her up at 12:30, and the assault went on until 6 o'clock a.m.
Oh my God.
So when it seemed to be over, she tried to play up feigning an interest in the man who had been driving. She was trying to make it seem like she was interested in him. She got him to give her his phone number, and they drove her back to the train station and let her go. That detail in her retelling is kind of vague. She reported all of this to the police, who initially didn't believe her until they realized that 3 men fitting the exact same description had been reported trying to grab an 18-year-old girl just an hour before at 11:30 p.m. So, who, of course, is involved in this? You're already putting one and two together. Police asked Ingrid if she would help him catch these guys. So she set up a date with the driver who she had given her phone number to, who was happy to take the date. And then when meeting him, she had a deal with the police that she would drop a handkerchief as soon as she saw him, alerting the police that that was who her attacker was. The young man at the time did not resist, did not fight. When the police came, he didn't react at all. Even when they pulled a long knife out from inside his boot, hidden. Police checked his ID, and of course, he was none other than U.S. Army Private Lonnie David Franklin Jr. How did this not make it to the documentaries? Anyway, I don't know. So he was the kitchen supervisor and resident cook. He had obtained the rank of specialist fourth class. He received an award in March 1973 for best mess for the third and fourth quarters in 1972. He did have a few minor disciplinary actions, like when he went AWOL when returning from leave in 1972. So he went there in January 1972, and then I guess he had some sort of leave where he went back to America. He ended up being demoted in rank because he came back late. He claims he missed his flight as he was caring for his mother, who was in a car accident years prior, and he was the only one who could take care of her at that exact time. Interesting. So he was arrested. He was charged with rape and kidnapping of Ingrid and the attempted kidnapping of the other girl. The other two men involved were also charged with the same crimes. Lonnie, of course, claimed complete innocence. All three of them gave conflicting, ever-changing stories. One of the others did say that he took pictures of the other unnamed man having sex with the girl. So I guess that part of it was true. There's little bits of this. It's very creepy when you hear how they tell the story and how she told the story. All three of the men did insist that the sex was consensual. But we should also note she was 17 and she didn't speak the same language. So there's a bit of a problem right there. The two other men said that she consensually had sex with all of them, then jumped in the front seat, kissed Lonnie, gave her his address, and he drove her home. All three of them denied having a knife, but all three of them claimed that one of the others did. So none of them's denying that there was a knife there, but it wasn't mine. The case was handled by German courts, which usually let the U.S. military discipline its own soldiers when they got into trouble there. But in this case, German prosecutors did not want the three men to get off with a slap on the wrist. And as Ingrid was a German citizen, they decided they would prosecute this under German law. Lonnie's mom flew to Germany. She was there for 3.5 months. She sat with a representative of the U.S. Army in the spectators gallery during the trial, which was held over 8 days at the end of 1974. The prosecutor said this was the most brutal assault he had seen in the past 10 years. He pointed out, however, that the other two men appeared to be more dangerous than Lonnie. I don't know what this was based on. Ingrid testified during the trial, as did a juvenile psychiatrist who had examined Ingrid in order to gauge if she had lied about the rape. The psychiatrist testified, in order for a person to make up such an elaborate tale, they would have had to have a motive and a high IQ. He didn't believe that Ingrid had either, so concluded she had to be telling the truth. Gotta love that. When the psychiatrist says that you're so dumb, you can't possibly be lying. I mean, I can't.
The only note I've written in all caps is just believe women.
Thank you very much. That's that is a theme that you're going to underline throughout the next hour and a half of your life.
Major kudos to Ingrid, who at just 17 knew enough, like she had enough foresight to be like, I need this guy's number because if I go to the police, I have a way to contact him and be like, here is the man. Because otherwise she would have been like, it was 3 officers and who knows what would happen. But this way she could specifically be like, I have a way to contact him. Go for it.
But also, why did he give it to her? Think about that on so many levels. Like, what was his perception of what happened? What was it like? Anyway, I'll get into that in a second. So Lonnie's lawyer claimed that he would never have committed an attack on his own and that he was under the influence of the 2 other men that night. Attacking women was just not part of his character. He also added that Lonnie genuinely thought Ingrid liked him. The lawyer asked for Lonnie to be given a chance to become a good citizen, make up for the offense, and return to his family. He along with the other two men's lawyers, attacked Ingrid's credibility as she had prior arrests for theft and had lied in court once about a car accident. Ingrid said that she lied because she had come home late and feared her mother's wrath. In the end, a panel of judges convicted Lonnie December 20th, 1974 for Ingrid's kidnapping and rape, as well as the attempted kidnapping of the other girl. He was sentenced to 3 years, 4 months, but the other two men were given sentences a year longer each. Nobody knows why. For some reason, I guess they believed that maybe in his story, in Lonnie's story, and I didn't want to get into all of it because it's like, gross. But anyway, I guess I do get into it. I love that I've said that and I'm about to get into it. Anyway, but long story short, he said that he did not have sex with her. So maybe they believed that he was just the driver and didn't have sex with her for some reason, even though she said that he did. I don't know. But
did the photographs ever come out? Like, did the police ever see them?
I have no idea. It's a great question. I mean, this story, I don't understand again how this wasn't a bigger part of his overall story when we're talking about a man who was convicted of many murders and assaults. It's odd to me that this wasn't a bigger part of the painting, but again, it is here. So while he was serving his sentence in Germany in July 1975, so that's 6 months after he's been convicted, a military board hearing was held to figure out if Lonnie should be discharged from the army. Lonnie's commander told the military panel that Lonnie ran the best mess hall, was always neat and cheerful, was the best cook they had, but because of the charges against him, did not want him back in the unit. A first lieutenant pointed out that Lonnie was not career-oriented, had few close friends, and seemed to be a loner. He said Lonnie spent most of his time working with or recording music with his stereo equipment, and that officer ultimately recommended he be discharged. When Lonnie addressed the panel, he blamed his friends for the attack. He said he pulled the car over that night to fix its gas pedal. He heard one of his friends talking to Ingrid in the back seat loudly. He said the man got angry and pulled a knife. Then he said that those two men had sex with Ingrid. They all drove back to the train station to drop her off where they found her, but that she said she lived somewhere else and could she get a ride? When they dropped her off, Lonnie said she kissed him, gave him her phone number, and waved as she walked off. He called her the next day, and that's when the arrest happened. Lonnie blamed his lawyer's outbursts in court for helping him get convicted. He also told the panel he was very bitter for being accused of something he didn't do. He claimed also that the two other men lied about Lonnie having sex with Ingrid because they were jealous that, quote, Ingrid wanted him. He said he picked her up because he had been stranded before and knew what it felt like. He also claimed one of the other men had pulled a knife on him and put it in his face. The military board did not buy any of it and did recommend a discharge. Here's the thing. They transferred him to Fort Jackson in South Carolina, where on May 5th, 1976, he received a general discharge, which made him ineligible to re-enlist in the military. However, it's not as bad as a dishonorable discharge, which makes it very difficult for someone to find city, state, or county work. The other two men involved, they did their full time. So Lonnie got out after a year, essentially, and a year and a half. The other men did the full extent of their time, which would have been about 4.5 years each, and then got dishonorable discharges. So he was back home in LA, basically in the summer of 1975. It's very, again, this whole thing is so strange to me. And I love that I said I wasn't going to get into his details. Then I thought I was going to. I didn't. The story that he told them was different than the story he told police, in which he said he couldn't get it up. So what's the truth? Anyway, or maybe it was one of the other boys said he couldn't get it up. No, I think the other boys both said that he had had sex with her as well. They definitely did. So it's again, all of their stories were constantly changing. So psychiatrist, I've never been a psychiatrist, psychologist hat on again. Here we go. I have read some studies. Yes, I read some studies.
There was never a doubt in my mind that you wouldn't get clinical.
Thank you very much. I felt I had to. So there was a prior belief that psychopaths can't distinguish between right and wrong, that they're unable. That's actually false, according to these other studies that I have read, which I can share. If people want to read them, it's very dry. But the ones I have read said that psychopaths can understand what's right and wrong. They simply don't care. Yeah. Another one I read showed that psychopaths have reduced connections between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain which is responsible for sentiments such as empathy and guilt, and the amygdala. There we go, which mediates fear and anxiety. So there have also been links between psychopathic behavior and a traumatic blow to the head, especially in childhood. Damage to a specific part of the forebrain can produce severe impairments in social and moral decision making, i.e., they know the difference between right and wrong, they just don't care. Findings also show people who have psychopathic symptoms behave as though they are suffering frontal brain damage. So even if somebody has not had a traumatic brain injury, they have the same kind of, they act in a similar way to someone who has. And I also just want to remind you, Richard Ramirez had 2 severe head injuries as a young child, and Lonnie's mother did potentially have that car accident while pregnant with him. I offer it.
Now, I know you said they were dry, but you know a place that you could share those case studies?
In a virtual case file on truecrimeandcocktails.com?
You bet your sweet ass you could.
Oh, they're going in there, baby.
Yeah,
they're going in. So after Lonnie was discharged, he returned to LA and met his future wife, Sylvia, at Los Angeles Trade Technical College. She was 21 at the time. They married and had 2 kids, Crystal in December 1978 and Christopher in 1981. On the surface, it seemed like Lonnie and Sylvia had a great marriage. But in reality, Lonnie had many girlfriends over the course of his 30-year marriage, and constantly, and when I say constantly, I mean on a daily basis, according to some of his friends, hired sex workers. This was well known in his friends group, but there is more on that to come. So Lonnie, after his dad died, moved back into the house that he grew up in. So he grew up in this one house that's on 81st Street, I believe, West 81st Street. It's a bungalow. It was painted this weird kind of almost like seafoam green color, which made it very recognizable to, I don't know, women who were telling stories about the way he's been brutalizing them. Anyway, and after he left, I believe, after he went to prison, I don't know whether Christopher ever left, but Christopher, I believe, did take over that house. So it was like Lonnie grew up there, lived there, and raised his kids. And now his child, Christopher, apparently, if he's not still there at the time of when I watched that documentary, he was. So Lonnie did many jobs when he was first back in LA. He ran a gas station, worked with Veterans Affairs. He was a security guard, a truck driver, worked with a friend doing maintenance work for an entertainment company, but he wanted health benefits. So he applied for a job with the city. And in 1981 was hired as a garage attendant at LAPD's Central Division. He was promoted to a mechanic. Obviously, as we know, he was very good with cars, but he gave it up a year later when he got a job with the Department of Sanitation as a garbage man. It paid better and offered more overtime. Okay, I get it. Your new dad, he wants to make more money. Okay.
Sure.
That's the only reason he'd work as a garbage man, right?
Oh, no.
His time with the sanitation department came with many injury claims and suggested limited use of his right arm. It was questioned later whether he had ever actually injured himself. He filed his first disability claim for a rotator cuff injury on January 6, 1983, 6 months after he was hired. By October 21st, 1985, he had filed 4 other injury claims. Okay. Another was filed March 1986. Another was filed November 1987. And he was on city leave in 1988 when a couple of women who were found murdered, one, Lucretia Jefferson, was found murdered, and another woman who actually was not murdered but was raped and shot, Anitria Washington. That was when he was on city leave in 1988. We put a pin in that. It just feels like it's important to note. Some of those other injury claims also kind of line up closely to some of the other victims as well. It's hard to tell whether it was like connected or if it was random. I think what the writer I was reading there was maybe making a connection. I don't know whether there was really a connection or not. It felt like he was making a lot of claims of disability is the bottom line. because his disabilities and their severity were questioned on November 5th, 1991, when he submitted a claim for disability benefits. Two city-paid orthopedists disagreed on his diagnoses. One found him capable of working, the other did not. So a third was brought in, and that third one did say that he unfortunately found Lonnie considered disabled. So now he is on full-time disability. This is, I believe, so this was 1991. That was when he was going in for his full disability benefits, which was great for him because now he was free to pursue his two apparent passions. One, illegal car repair, and trolling for hookers. Boy, oh boy, did he love stolen cars and sex workers. But again, more on that to come. Publicly, he was seen as a kind and thoughtful neighbor. Tanya Bowden, neighbor of Lonnie, said he was a go-to guy if he needed help. He fixed kids' bikes in the neighborhood, took old ladies to the grocery store. Her kids even called him Uncle Lonnie. She had absolutely no suspicion of danger with him. But looking back, she says she realizes you never really know anybody. A man named Ray Davis says he was Lonnie's best friend. He says Lonnie could make stuff work. He said they talked about girls, that they weren't that popular with girls. He says Lonnie was only about 5'7", that he was an itty-bitty guy. He also said that Lonnie gave everyone a nickname. And by everyone, he means the women he was sleeping with. Turkey thigh, horse lips. He called one girl either big thighs or big legs, couldn't remember. Another, droopy titties. Ray thought it was weird because he didn't do that kind of thing, but that was just Lonnie. He also said that Lonnie became a sanitation guy, and while he was working as a garbage man, people would put out car parts with their trash. Lonnie would take note of where those car parts were put out and would come back later and take the parts in his own truck as part of his, again, car repair, illegal car repair, stolen car repair business. Other people said he would fix neighbors' cars for free using these found parts, or sometimes he would even buy new parts to fix their cars for them for free. So many people interviewed in the documentaries talked about how well known he was in the neighborhood, that he was always smiling, always wanting to stop and chat with you. The jokes that people were making was that it was like, uh-oh, don't get caught with Lonnie. He'll talk your ear off, like one of those kind of types of guys.
Right.
The Google Earth image. So you know how the Google car goes around with the camera on the top to take a picture of every house in the world?
Yeah.
If you look up his, now I'm not sure if it's still like this now, they may have taken it down since he's a convicted killer. But for a while, you can see him in front of his house chatting to another man. That's kind of, again, it was like he did this so often. He was out there talking to the neighbors all the time that even when the Google Earth car went by, they caught him doing it. You can also, so sorry. I just had a brain fart. So basically, he was like the mayor of the neighborhood. He also never used drugs, never smoked. He claims to not be a drinker, although some sources did say he would drink a little bit of beer when he was in the army. His friends even said that he really looked down on people who drank and did drugs, and that he despised people who smoked crack, even though most of his friends did. Some of them said that they felt very looked down upon by him for it. Now, Tales of the Grim Sleeper, which is the documentary I have referenced, they spoke to many of his friends, many people that knew him. As a quick aside, the filmmaker is in the film, like he's interviewing people. You can see him and hear him. It's a British guy named Nick Broomfield. And I was like, how do I know this man? And then I realized that he also made the Aileen Wuornos documentary, The Selling of a Serial Killer, which is an excellent documentary. And I'm sure we will cover Aileen Wuornos in my serial killer series for sure. He also made the documentaries Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah.
And Kurt and Courtney and more.
That's right. I mean, I remember him because it was such a weird thing to watch a white British guy walking around trying to ask questions about two like hard rappers. Like it was a weird thing, but yeah, I like I like everybody that keeps coming back.
I do too. Well, there's more to come with that too. I also like that what you just said about it being weird for him to be talking about that fits beautifully into this next statement. Lonnie's friends, Gary, Steve, and Richard were really pissed at Nick for being in their neighborhood and called him Peckerwood, which is a white supremacist term but eventually they warmed up to him.
So see, at first everyone's like, don't know about him, but eventually he wins everyone over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those three guys were interviewed together at the start of the documentary, and they all told him that Lonnie couldn't possibly be guilty. He was the kind of guy that would have stopped a dope house from going up in the neighborhood. When the police came that day, they thought it was probably about a car theft. They thought, though they quickly covered, saying, whoa, we've never known Lonnie to steal a car. He just dealt in stolen cars. And then one of them was like, yeah, shitload of stolen cars, to be clear. So I guess that's somehow better. Anyway, I like that they were like, we need to make it clear. We never physically saw him steal a car, but he absolutely sold and traded stolen cars.
Okay.
So they said he couldn't have done it. This is one of my favorite examples of why. They said he taught his son Christopher how to drive when he was 9. And if you value life like that, how can you take a life? Do you value life by teaching a 9-year-old how to drive? I'd say quite the contrary.
I mean, in their family at 9, it's a little late.
He started late.
But
you know what I mean? I was
those
like,
two statements are not anywhere connected. You value life if you teach your child to drive at an age they shouldn't be. Like,
I didn't get it. I was like, I don't get that train of thought at all. But basically they all, by the end of this first interview, they all said they will go to their graves believing he didn't do it. Until Gary contacted Nick not so long later saying he kind of wanted to talk. Firstly, he was like, the first thing I got to say is I got to take my hat off for the victims' families, of course. Then he says, I didn't believe that Lonnie did it, but now the media is kind of creating some doubt. He's like, I did see him with a .25 automatic pistol, which was the weapon that was used in all of the killings. He said he kept it in the breast pocket of his shirt and that he would often just show it to Gary. He also said he saw handcuffs fall out of Lonnie's car. He said, what are you, the police? Lonnie just laughed it off. Gary then said he felt like maybe Lonnie was showing him things. There was a very, very heavy reward if you had any information leading to the prosecution and conviction of the grim sleeper. Did he want Gary to get the reward? I'm like, hold on a second. So you think that maybe he did it because maybe he would want you to have the money, not just because you happened to see him have things like handcuffs, I don't know, the gun that was similar to the murder weapon, all of these things. Then here's the next thing. This also maybe wasn't part of it for you. He says he showed Gary a picture of a naked girl that was taken inside Lonnie's house. Lonnie, he said, this is inside your house. Where was your old lady? Lonnie just gave a little laugh. So then he said that he's starting to feel like Lonnie may have been trying to get caught. If he didn't do it, why was he showing Gary all that stuff? But then Gary said Lonnie was heavily into porn and women, but can you really go to the police about that? That's the only thing that I agree with Gary on, was that I get it, Gary. If it's just that someone's really into porn and women, and is that enough to make a police call? Probably not. But there was the handcuffs, the gun, the stolen cars, the fact that, you felt like maybe he was the killer.
Gare Bear. I don't know what to do.
No. Gary also buckle in, because Gary, at this point, you think, maybe he's slightly innocent. He's going to disappoint you real fast if he hasn't already. So the filmmaker, as I said, Nick, he mentioned to Gary that Lonnie was described by many people as being, quote, weird. Gary confirmed this, saying he was weird in his own way. He was weird, but he was Lonnie. If you knew him, you knew him. He was weird. Okay. A couple days pass. Lo and behold, because it was Gary, Steve, and Richard that he originally talked to. All of a sudden, Richard also wants to meet up with Nick again. I got permission from Mrs. Franklin to tell you about an incident that occurred when I was with Lonnie. I want to remind you, all of these men said, not days prior, I will take it to my grave that he never did it. So Richard and Lonnie are driving around, apparently supposed to be scouting for some sort of car. They're driving down Figueroa, and then he sees a girl, and he says, and now I'm going to read this from Richard's point of view. Lonnie sort of flips. So he passed her maybe 10 or 15 feet past her. He gets out, ran back to her, and they start having words. She started to go in. He grabs her, put her arm behind her, and grabbed a handful of her hair and tried to drag her to the car. All the time, Richard is watching this, I want to remind you. She was hollering, "Help me, let me go." So Richard finally asks, "What are you doing?" Lonnie then seemed to collect himself, Richard said, and lets her go. But before he can just walk plainly to the car, the police come out of nowhere, and Richard and Lonnie are arrested. Richard was never charged with anything. They were never told why they were being arrested. They didn't get booked. They didn't get fingerprinted. Absolutely nothing. They were put in cells, kept for hours. Police would not talk to them. And then someone came and told them they were allowed to go. They had split them up. So for 3 hours, he and Lonnie were in separate cells. But at the end of the time, Lonnie and Richard were released at the exact same time, and Lonnie's wife picked them up. He did not say what year that was, which would be interesting to know as we continue to get into the police investigation and everything, or
Right.
But it's just very interesting to me that they had him. The police
Yeah.
had him. If what Richard is saying is true, and I don't know why he would lie about that, but who knows?
Yeah. I also like that he was like trying to attack a woman, and it took Richard a while before he was finally like, dude, sup.
Well, if you think that's bad.
Oh, no.
So Gary and Richard are both bachelors, and along with Lonnie, apparently said that they were all members of a amateur photographic society, along with others in the neighborhood. Gary said, now I literally wrote this down word for word, so forgive me. Lonnie would say he knew some freaks, and Gary said he did too, and they'd be comparing notes. I guess he was maybe talking in the third person, unless I made a mistake. But anyway, after Gary got his divorce, he said he was a single man. He was hurting. He turned into a bachelor, and that's what he would do. He's not proud of it, but he's not into killing either. Okay. So then Gary shows Nick some pics and says, this is what Lonnie and I would share with one another. He had albums, photo album upon photo album of all of these. I mean, I don't know how you want to classify it. Scantily clad to varying degrees of nude women in sexual poses. Yeah. There was tons of them. Some of them were Polaroids, some of them weren't. On one of the Polaroids, it said "to Gary" on it, and Gary said, "This is a girl who enjoys having sex and posing. She feels that the photos are a form of art." I hope that's true. I hope that she was consenting. They went on to say that these friends that we're talking about, Gary, Richard, Lonnie, they would all sit around and show these kinds of pictures to each other in Lonnie's garage, and that a lot of these pictures were kept in a shoebox in that garage. Then Gary all of a sudden brazenly just shows more pictures that he has on his own cell phone. So now it's like, I love that these guys started by saying everything's squeaky clean. Now they're in the deep end. He also reveals that Lonnie had a camera in the back of his van on a tripod with a mattress. He said, this is also going to be very graphic. He also talked about Lonnie's pictures and that you never saw Lonnie's face. Sometimes you could see his fingers and vaginas, but never his face.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not going to get better. So the camper van that they're talking about, the van that has the tripod and the mattress, it was a camper van. So there was, because I was like, how big is this van? It was big enough. You can actually see it parked in the driveway in that same Google Earth picture that you can see Lonnie in talking to another man. And who was the man Lonnie was talking to in that picture? That was a man named Jerry. Oh, and Jerry. Oh boy. So Jerry Jerry worked with Lonnie as a mechanic in the day and his companion at night, picking up women. He was the one that said they did it sometimes daily. So Richard, who we already know, introduced the filmmaker Nick to Jerry. Jerry said he was with Lonnie when he was with about half the women on the police composite. The police composite is something we'll get into in a bit. When he was arrested, they went through his garage. They found over 1,000 images of different women and teenage girls, 1,000 images and videos, excuse me. And they found 180 women that had not been identified. And the police made this giant composite that had all of their photos on it.
Oh.
So Jerry's saying he's looked through it and he knew about half of them. He was with Lonnie for about 90 of those 180.
Oh.
Jerry said he met Lonnie when he made Lonnie buy a bike for him, that he was jonesing for crack and would have done anything for money or drugs at the time. So it's interesting to me that Lonnie was spending his time with somebody who was a crack addict, but women who were crack addicts,
couldn't handle it.
Buckle in. Jerry says the majority of women they picked up, they knew from the neighborhood, from being gals who perhaps were working.
Sure.
He said that they would often say, how much for the both of us? And that the women would either say half and half, straight cash, or straight crack. So meaning either all cash, all crack, or half and half. It should also be noted that in the 80s, the crack epidemic was unbelievable. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. But certainly in this area too. I mean, it was insane. So he and Lonnie would get the girls whatever they wanted to drink. He said they had no problems with it. Then he goes on to say, well, if some of them got attitudes, Lonnie would withhold the drugs. Or if they weren't performing like he wanted, he'd just put them out in the street naked. Sometimes he would drop Jerry off and keep one of the girls with him. Jerry thinks those could have been the ones he killed if he did it. But Jerry didn't know for sure. But he did know he needed to get home to his girl on those nights.
Oh. Nope.
No thanks. Again, we are the company we keep. So Nick asked all of these guys about Lonnie's wife, Sylvia, who, as we know, they were married for 30 years. So what's the story there? Sylvia was well respected in the community. She worked in the school superintendent's office and went to church at the end of the street every Sunday. She was a devout Christian. This was well known about her. Richard said he was always confused about how Sylvia would be willing to put up with whatever Lonnie did and feels she would have had to have found stuff around the house, though she never, ever went into the garage. Gary said, are they really married? You never saw them together. He said he never saw them in the same car once in 20 years. In 20 years of marriage, he said he never saw them riding in the same car at the same time. Some people speculated that they thought that they had separate bedrooms. But a woman named Delashon dated Christopher Franklin, who we of course know is Lonnie's son, when they were in high school. She said at the time, she didn't know that there was marital problems between Lonnie and Sylvia, but she also didn't know that Sylvia had her own place. Yeah.
Okay.
So Sylvia and Lonnie were living in separate houses. And Delashon said, I guess it made sense because she would leave for days at a time, like big chunks of time. And then she said she eventually realized that she doesn't think they ever lived together. And she also said that, you know, when Sylvia would leave for those big amounts of time, Lonnie was just free to do whatever, whenever. So now we're brought to Lonnie's friend, Fernando. Fernando says Lonnie would joke about killing crackheads and cleaning up the streets, but no one believed him. He said, like, no one believed that he was serious. They thought, oh, it was just a joke.
Yeah.
He said that Lonnie's first wife made him hate women. She was a straight crackhead, would take his money, not pay for bills, but buy drugs. They think this is what made him hate women. In reality, he said, Lonnie's a good guy, but there's a hatred inside of him that would trigger him. Does that mean you're a good guy?
Oh,
You know what I mean? It's like, he was a good guy. He just had a terrible, terrible darkness within him. He went on to say If Lonnie saw a woman on the street with crack, he would go off. He hated anyone who smoked crack. He didn't like drugs or drinking at all. He would look down on you for doing it, but he would give them crack to get them in his car.
He also didn't hate everyone who did crack because he had his friend Jerry,
Oh yeah.
who admitted to being an
And I'm
addict.
not so sure about those other guys. Maybe I'm not saying they didn't say they did crack, but I mean, I don't know. Again, it was an epidemic. A lot of people were doing it at the time.
Sure.
But this was a quote that I really liked of Fernando's. So as I just said, he said that he'd give them crack to get in the car. But then Fernando said, but they don't know they messed with the wrong man. You get in his car, you ain't coming out unless you dead. That was exactly how he said it.
But I thought that Lonnie was a good guy.
And that no one took him seriously about killing the crackheads. Crackhead, not my word, for the record, that I'm quoting Fernando so eloquently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Richard, as we know, his other friend,
Yeah.
in the course of the documentary, ends up in the hospital because he was beaten up by Chris, Lonnie's son.
Okay.
He saw Richard on the street, said, I heard you've been talking bad about my dad. Then Richard turns, saw 4 guys coming up the street. They start hitting him and Chris takes off. So when I say he got beat up by Chris didn't physically do it. These 4 guys did. His jaw got severely injured. And he said, to your point before, this is why it was so important for him to keep Nick and the camera guy hidden in the neighborhood. If he did that to me, he said, imagine what he would do to you guys. So some time passes. We check in with Jerry. At this point, he is homeless, living on the streets. He says he knew most of the women on that composite, but still hasn't been spoken to by the police. Then he says there were times when he tortured them. He'd laugh, give a grin, wink. He was just having fun. He didn't see that there was killing in him, per se, but he knew that he was torturing these women, quote, a lot. He said the strawberries, which is a term that they used for sex workers who worked for drugs, the strawberries would do anything. Some would fuck them both for $2. Again, these are not my words. And then Jerry says, I can't sit there and make no stuff up because I was there. Actually, myself, I was there and I know what we did. This is really graphic. This is a huge trigger warning. It's awful. And I'm not going to get into any specifics after this point.
Just
but
hit
if
and
you want
run.
to skip ahead like 10 seconds.
Yep.
20.
Okay.
Because I don't want you to come in on this if it's going to upset you.
Yeah.
Jerry says about Lonnie, he liked to be rough with them, fuck them in the ass a lot, stick bottles in them, stick screwdrivers up in them, backwards stick the handle of a screwdriver in them and fuck them. Or he'd take a screwdriver and just ram it around their ass with it. I've seen that, but it didn't bother me because I was on crack. There was times I asked God to forgive me for what I did, but I know for a fact I didn't kill them. Again, like I said, Jerry's not so cute anymore. I mean,
no.
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, that's such a level of horrific depravity, and his candor in that conversation was awful. And the fact also that like he was like, I just watched it repeatedly again and again and again with multiple women all the time. I watched it, but I didn't care because I was on crack.
Yeah, that's the idea that he sat through it once is something I can't really comprehend. But the fact that he sat through it multiple times and was just like, yeah, but it's not me. So it's like, these women are still being brutalized. Whether it's you or not.
Well, and also then we spark a conversation of like, obviously it's like you're an accessory to the crime, dude. Like if you sat and witnessed that, in my opinion, you're not, I mean, yeah, you're guilty. You should be, he should be in prison too, in my opinion. God. Anyway, that's that. Again, we're not going to get into any more details, but I felt it was important to also include, for those who can stomach it, just to give a real kind of glimpse into this is what his friends are saying about him. If this is what your friends are saying about you,
Yeah. The friends who already told us he's a good guy.
Right. But again,
you can't be both.
Well,
you can't do both. You know,
I think we know the truth.
Mm.
So we're going to switch gears. A woman named Margaret Prescott. She was the founder of the Black Coalition fighting Black serial murders, and she was very critical of how the police were handling the case. She was handing out flyers in 1985 in the area, spreading awareness. She said that this was after the 17th victim, but obviously at that time, there was not that many victims. Well, first of all, there was being no victims reported. This is the first thing to make very, very clear. So it's believed that Lonnie's first victim was a woman named Deborah Jackson in 1985. I'll get into that in a few minutes. But Margaret believes that all of this actually started in 1982. And that stood out to me. Why? I'll tell you. 1982. If you'll remember, why is that year relevant? That's when Lonnie started working with the sanitation department. So there was women going missing, some of whom the bodies were never found.
Oh.
What was he doing with the Department of Sanitation? He was a loader. And this was before they had rear loaders. So he was the one putting the things in the truck. He worked with ample access to a garbage truck daily. So, and then also they would drive it to the landfill and dump it. And if he was keeping the kind of friends that were keeping the other secrets for him, who's to say that whoever was his partner on his garbage route wouldn't keep those secrets for him too? So there is a thought that there could be many more bodies in landfills in California that were never found. That is a theory that has been floating around. But I think it's also interesting to note that in 1988, the Los Angeles was going through major changes in its sanitation department. How do I know this? Because I researched it.
Of course you did.
So the city first considered constructing 3 incinerators, but concern was raised over potential health effects. That probably would have been a dream for him if he was able to load garbage into a crematorium. But in 1988, Mayor Tom Bradley set a 50% waste reduction goal. A year later, the California State Assembly passed the California Integrated Waste Management Act, directing all cities and counties to divert 25% of their waste away from landfills by 1995 and 50% of their waste by the year 2000. This included overall waste reduction messaging, as well as introducing an intense recycling program in 1989. It should also be noted, the Bureau of Sanitation created a 16,000 household automated collection pilot program in 1988, which showed that the automated trucks could service way more, twice as many homes as the older manual trucks, the ones he was working on. Automated trucks required only one operator. The additional workers could be assigned to the recycling vehicles. So isn't it interesting that shortly after all of these giant changes in the sanitation department were happening, 1988 being when he took a long break, that's when all that started. And then he fully left by 1991 when all of these things would have been almost fully in place. The things that would have been making, I don't know, dumping bodies, using your job as a garbage truck operator more difficult, because if they were taking those trucks off the road, replacing them with automated trucks, making a concerted effort to cut down on waste, that the waste was really being monitored because they were cutting down but by 25% at a certain date, 50% by another date, the recycling program. I don't know. Was he injured? Was he just sick of the job? Or was he starting to lose interest because it was getting rid of his way to amply dispose of bodies without being ever caught? Just saying. Anyway, I think the timing is very interesting on that. So it should have, that was a huge aside because I found that. And then I was like, I think that's wild. So again, back to Margaret Prescott. So she obviously believes that this was never taken seriously because it was racial. She said at one point that there were 90 women at her count who had gone missing or whose bodies had been found, but only 18 of them were on the books. Are some of them in the photos that were found in Lonnie's garage? If not, where are these women? Again, these are the questions she's asking. Nobody knew. The police never revealed any of this information to the public. And I'll get into that in a little bit later. I know I keep saying that, but again, I got to get all the base. This was a bear to try and like structure because I got to get all this out. And then in the second half, I'm setting up the pins and then I'll knock them down.
Nice.
The bottom line is, and this is Margaret's point, my point, I think everybody's point who's heard about this case, the police have no idea how many women were actually murdered. And that's just truth. The police did know that I want to say it was 10 women were murdered before they announced anything. And we'll get into those details later too. But she went to them and said, why aren't you concerned about this? And they said, and this is a quote, why are you concerned about it? He's only killing hookers. That was said to her by the police. Margaret then provided some important context to remember when talking about all of this. And I think that this is really important to hit before we get into the second half. This is a community that survived against all odds. So for the history, Black people moved from the South and moved to California and often ended up in South LA. There was industry then. They were brought because there was ample jobs. There was an ability to make income, but that industry dried up and the factories and the jobs left the area. So at that point, there was all these people and no way to make money. And then at the same time, the crack cocaine epidemic came in. It was the riots had happened, poverty levels, crack cocaine. There was a huge feeling of who cares about this community. There was no one advocating. The LAPD wasn't advocating. The city officials felt like they could get away with just ignoring it. It was also important to note, I thought this was an amazing statistic, that in the 1980s, crack dealers employed more people in South Central than AT&T, IBM, and Xerox combined. That gives you like a real, because those were huge companies at that point in the 80s,
right.
Obviously. In that area, it's estimated that a third of Black males, again, at the time of the documentary, will receive felony convictions at some point. And it should also be noted that when you receive a felony conviction, you lose the right to vote, you lose the right to get food stamps, and you lose the right to public housing as well as most jobs. So the system, as we know, and this is a very broad conversation that could take hours on this podcast, but it is very important to remember in the context of talking about this case that the system has failed, is built to fail, and has failed so many people in this community at this time. Another stat, less than 50% of this community graduates from high school. And then this was a quote that also really resonated with me. LA is one of America's most prosperous cities, but has this community that has been completely left behind. I just think it's like really important to remember all of this. Again, these were people that were left in poverty. Again, the drugs, it was this vicious cycle. There was no want to help rehabilitate people. The prison system isn't built that way. It's certainly not in how it was treating these people, because you get convicted of a felony, then your life is basically over and you have no choice potentially but to continue trying to survive, doing what it takes, whatever you got to do to make money, whatever you got to do to eat, all of the above. And she also made a great point too, that Black women were allowed to walk around during this time while someone was actively hunting them. This went on for years. They didn't even know they were being hunted at the time. And imagine if they had treated victim 3 like a rich blonde woman from Beverly Hills, how many women would still be living? I mean, the lack of concern just left the hunting ground free and open for Lonnie to do whatever he wanted. It should also be noted that the relationship with the police in that community is very strained. No one wants to be the person giving the police information. You just don't. One woman said she's instructed her 16-year-old son to call a list of numbers if something bad happens and to never call 911. She said, why would he? So they can show up and blow him away? Great point. We see it a lot. it was also brought up that you can't just walk into an LAPD or a sheriff's department station as a Black person and say, I have something to report, start describing something, and think you're going to be treated with dignity, kindness, concern, or feel like you can leave feeling warm. There's a 99% chance it's going to be an unpleasant situation for you. Again, I was like, I think this is all really important to think about as we move into the second half of this. You know, would this have happened if these women were white or rich? Absolutely not. Would it have gone on for that long? I don't think so. And again, just to give the context of what was going on for people, again, people turning to drugs, people trying to make money, selling drugs, doing all of the above. And then the bottom line being, now I'm not defending Jerry's choices, but for other people that maybe did see things or maybe there was things going on, they didn't feel like they could go to the police. The women, especially, they wouldn't be believed. Why would they bother? It was a waste of their time. And it just created something that, again, we'll continue to dive into in the second half.
I have so many feelings. But you know what? I'm gonna choke those feelings down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to top up my cocktail.
Yeah.
So, dear listeners, why don't you grab a drink, hit the can, and we'll be right back with more on The Grim Sleeper on this episode of True Crime and Cocktails, Famous Fatalities Edition. Resume. There we go. Oh boy. All right. Welcome back to True Crime and Cocktails, Famous Fatalities Edition. Before the break, my dear Lauren was setting up the pins, and now she's gonna knock them down. So, Lauren, what else you got for me?
All right. So I've said a lot of times, put a pin, remember this, we'll get into it later. We're going to get into all of it now. And it's a lot of info. So I'm going to try and get through it as quick as I can. So Lonnie's first victim is believed to be Deborah Jackson. Her body was found August 10th, 1985. She was 29 at the time. She was found under a discarded carpet in an alley. Her body was decomposing and was so puffy, they couldn't tell if she was bloated or if she had been beaten. She had been shot in the left side of her chest 3 times by a .25 caliber pistol. But her death was overshadowed by another case, as the day before, police in LA County had held a press conference announcing they were searching for a killer in a series of murders, including the recent shooting death of 34-year-old female Dale Okazaki and wounding her roommate, Maria Hernandez. Any ideas? That's right, listeners. They were looking for Richard Ramirez, who was caught 3 weeks later on August 31st, 1985. I'll remind you that Deborah Jackson's killer would not be found for another 2 decades. But the Night Stalkers murders were happening in middle to upper class areas and not in South Central. Police said that they kept an eye out for any .25 caliber pistols booked into evidence, hoping that the gun that was used to kill Deborah would turn up at a crime scene or during an arrest. A year later, detectives discovered that the same gun was used to kill another woman found in a different South Central alley. On August 12th, 1986, the body of Henrietta Wright was found, shot again in the chest, found under a mattress. There was no DNA present and no witnesses. These .25 caliber killings were not the only murders that detectives were investigating at the time. There was also another serial killer called the South Side Slayer. He stabbed and strangled his victims instead of shooting them. Michael Hughes was eventually named the South Side Slayer, as was Chester Turner and Lewis Crane. It's now believed that who they once thought was just one serial killer was actually 3 or 4 men, not working together, just all men who were assaulting and killing sex workers at that same time in that same way. It's over 80 women's deaths could be attributed to those men. And it's just so overwhelming to think about. I mean, it just speaks to what a time this was. There were so many women on the street, so many battling addiction. Many people felt that young Black women with drug addictions weren't as much of a priority for the police. Some have also said the quote, when something happens in South LA, nothing happens, which I thought was quite prolific. In the 80s, it said that there was around 800 homicides a year in Los Angeles, and about half of those would be in South Central, but police weren't given more resources that were stationed in that area. One team of 2 detectives could be covering 3 murders in a weekend. The whole department was understaffed. I am not making excuses for the police at all. I'm just adding for context that they were not given, even though there was an influx of homicides, they were not equipped with more manpower. Again,
Right.
I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm just saying
Mm.
it's not like the LAPD says we're going to staff you based on need. It's just everybody gets the same amount. So, January 10th, 1987, an anonymous caller calls 911 and reports a murder at 1346 East 56th Street in an alley. The man who calls says he threw a gas tank on top of her and all you can see is her feet. He also said he didn't see the guy. The caller said it was a white and blue Dodge van and gave the full license plate number. The 911 operator asked his name and he said he wanted to remain anonymous. I know a lot of people, he said. Okay, bye-bye. The van was registered to a church. The police found it at that church later and it was still warm. It wasn't until 2002 that police re-listened to the recording of that 911 call again. And then they revisited the photos of that blue and white van. And then they realized that there was a giant ladder on the outside of the van that was obscuring and blocking the first half of the license plate. So there's absolutely no way a person could just look at it and read it and remember it. It was blocked. The only way you would know that full license plate number is if you got up really close on a really specific angle, or I don't know, if you were the one driving the van and making the 911 call. That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's he doing with that? Is he trying to prove he's smarter than the police? We'll get into that later. But that third victim was a woman named Barbara Ware. She was 23 and, of course, shot in the chest. The next 3 victims, Bernita Sparks, April 16th, 1987, Mary Lowe, November 1st, 1987, and Lucretia Jefferson, January 30th, 1988, all had rape kits done, and DNA was successfully collected from all of them. Now, keep in mind, this is 1987, 1988. So it wasn't until 2003 that they were able, through new technology at that time, to determine that the DNA from all 3 of those cases was the same. It was a match. So this is clearly proof of a serial killer. They just didn't know who. The next victim was Monique Alexander on September 11th, 1988. She was last seen exiting a liquor store and getting into a car, an orange rust-colored car. Police automatically thought that had to be the killer. He could be killing women in his car, as there are never any bullet casings at the scenes with the bodies. Maybe those shell casings were left in his car. Okay. Then on November 19th, 1988, Anitria Washington. This is a woman who survived her attack. She's the only person who he shot who survived. So it's a Saturday. She said it was 4 or 5 p.m. She was just off work going to her friend Linda's house, and then they were going to go on to a party. She was walking by a liquor store and remembers seeing a pimped out orange Pinto. That's how she described it. So it also should be important to note the 5th victim, Mary Lowe, was seen getting into that exact same Pinto that Anitria described. Okay. And it should also be noted that Monique Alexander was seen getting into an orange or rust colored car, which also fits that description. So Anitria noticed the driver noticing her. So she was kind of like checking out the car. It's a unique car, orange Pinto that had these white racing stripes.
Sure.
And so he says to her, want to drive? She said no. And he said, that's what's wrong with you black women. No one can be nice to you. So she, I guess, thought that she wanted to prove him wrong. She felt whatever, like, oh, wow, like she felt offended. So she got in the car. It was a short drive, so she thought it wasn't a big deal. She said he seemed very normal at first. There were no red flags, but then he made a left instead of going straight. And as soon as he turned left, she said he started calling her another person's name. She said he started asking her, why are you always dogging me out? Ranting, yelling at her, calling her another woman's name. She did not say what the name was. She obviously wanted out of the car. So then she's like, shit, what happened? She reaches for the door and he says to her, reach for the door and I'll shoot you again. She didn't realize he had already shot her. in the chaos of everything happening. She says she had felt no pain, but then, of course, said, "You've got to take me to the hospital." He said no. She passes out. She wakes up and he's taking photographs of her. She sees the flash. She passes out again. She wakes up with him on top of her, sexually assaulting her. She said that's when she started to feel the pain in her chest. She said it was a crushing feeling. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Shortly after, she rolled out of the car onto the street. A voice said, "Get up." I don't know if that was in her head or if that was in real life. This is how she described it. She said she saw a street sign, Denker Avenue, and she knew she could get to her friend Linda's house from there. Miraculously, she somehow walked from there to her friend Linda's house and laid down on the porch until Linda got home. Linda, of course, freaks out. She's rushed to the hospital. She says she woke up naked under a sheet and thought she had died. She said she had a tube stuck in her side that was draining blood. And apparently the doctor said her rib cage had deflected the bullet. It was right by her heart. He went to tried to shoot her in the heart, but he hit her rib cage and it saved her life. It like deflected off. Can you imagine?
Wow.
My God. Yeah. And once again, she had been shot with a 25 caliber automatic, the exact same firearm that had murdered all the other women. It should also be noted a 25 caliber, because I didn't know this, are very small. People, it's like they call it like a pocket gun or something. Like it's very small. You can like literally fit it in your pocket. So she did a composite with a sketch artist. Okay. She described a black male in his 30s, well-spoken, clean shaven, short. She said she was definitely taller than him in tennis shoes. Police felt that they were close at this time, but didn't release the composite to the public or tell anybody what was going on, even though at this point they knew they definitely had a serial killer. So Anitria was victim number 8 at this point that they knew about, that they knew there was a connection to, that they saw that there was a connection with the gun, if nothing else, ballistics. Like they were on to him at this point, but they did nothing publicly. The police did do stops in the area looking for that orange Pinto, but they had no luck. But remember, Lonnie was buying cars in the 80s from people. He did not care if they were stolen. He would tune them up, resell them. And apparently his best friend, Ray Davis, said he kept changing the interiors in the cars he used. Yeah. Not to mention Richard, we all remember Richard, said he cleaned the carpet in the mobile home 4 or 5 times for Lonnie. He said he thought it was oil, but now he thinks it probably could have been blood. He said it was hard to get up, unlike oil normally is. And another man who didn't name his name said he would burn cars for Lonnie. I was like, oh, what's that terminology? No, literally, he would burn cars for Lonnie. He called them insurance jobs, meaning he would set the cars on fire for Lonnie. He assumed for insurance money. He described one time when he went to Lonnie's house, got his keys, drove the car elsewhere, and discovered female clothes with blood on them in the car, as well as blood on the back seat and on the floor. He said it was a lot of blood, and he knew for sure it was blood, but he didn't think anything of it. He just knew he was supposed to burn the car, for the insurance money. Yep. It should also be noted that Lonnie was by far the wealthiest man on the street, and his friends said that Lonnie could pick and choose anybody he wanted to employ, and everybody wanted to work for him, and apparently keep his secrets.
I never stop living for those moments, just so you know.
Thank you very much. So a few months after Anitria was attacked, an LA County sheriff was caught in a car with a sex worker. The sheriff's name was Ricky Ross. This girl claimed that they had smoked crack together, which he denied. She said she was scared of him and that he showed her a gun in his trunk. Police did do a search of his car and did find a 9mm gun in his trunk, so they arrested him. Experts said that the ballistic of his gun matched the bullets used in the murders of 3 women. This is an LA County sheriff. So police thought maybe Ricky Ross also has a 25 caliber pistol somewhere and he did all these other murders, right? Anitria, I want to remind you, she saw this man in person. She says unequivocally, that is not the man who attacked me. She's like, this guy's tall. The guy was short. She was like, they're just, it's not the same guy. But the police said, oh, she was an unreliable witness. Mhm.
Because she was only up close and personal with him. How would
Yep.
she have possibly known what he looked
How
like?
would she have possibly known? They also apparently said that eyewitness sketches aren't reliable, though in many cases, an expert in the documentary pointed out, police usually say the opposite in court cases, saying they have an eyewitness, they have a police sketch. It was a great point, I thought, that she brought up. Anyway, Anitria also in the time when after the attack, she apparently was able to bring the police to the street where Lonnie lived. She knew where he lived within two houses. She didn't know the exact house, but she's like, I know it's one of these houses. Apparently they didn't care. When she was asked why she didn't think the police believed her, she said, quote, they believe all Black women are hookers.
Okay.
Long story short, in terms of the Ricky Ross case, the bullets were examined by two other ballistics experts, and they actually did not match those bullets from those three women's deaths. So he was let go. But all the cops at the time thought for sure he was still the 25 caliber killer, which was what they were calling the Grim Sleeper at the time. In 1989, the killings abruptly stopped after Anitria. So it seems that the cops just kind of lost interest at that point. Then 13 years pass.
Okay.
Yeah. March 19th, 2002, the body of Princess Berthomeu, she was 15, she was a foster care runaway, was found in Inglewood. Then, July 19th, 2003, Valerie McCorvey, 35, was found strangled in South Central. These two were linked through DNA found to the murders that happened in the 80s. But how? I'll tell you. I fully lost my mind.
I'm living for it. I just want you to know that.
Great, because my energy is woo. So 3 years later, January 2006, crime reporter Christine Pelisek, who grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
Shout out Canadian women.
Thank you very much, Christine Pelisek. She visited the office of LA County Department of Medical Examiner Coroner. That's the official title. She was there to see Assistant Chief Ed Winter. She wrote for LA Weekly as a crime reporter. She was often there following up on different cases for stories she was writing. Winter was the coroner's media liaison. They had a good relationship, and she was curious if there was anything interesting that had been going on that she could possibly report on. He told her they had been looking into some female body dump cases. They use the term body dump when someone is killed in one place, but then the body is moved somewhere else, often an alley or a dumpster, and they are notoriously difficult cases to solve. He told her that 6 months prior, the coroner's investigators told him that there had been an alarming number of body dumps at these routine death scene locations, like dumpsters, et cetera, in that area. There was a list of 38 female victims who had died from 2002 to 2005. So Winter launched a serial killer task force when he learned of this, thinking that some of the cases could be linked. He didn't have the manpower rather, to pull crime scene investigators from their day jobs. So they were just encouraged to look for similarities in these cases on their free time. He tried, but also just not enough. So Christine said, she asked if they had made much progress, but he said that the LAPD and also the sheriff's department had ignored him when he reached out to them about it. Apparently, homicide investigators do not like coroner officials or journalists or podcasters poking around their cases. Christine offered to look into it, but Winter said no. She then badgered him for 2 months, and then he finally handed her over the cases, which I love. A few weeks after that, he also provided all of the autopsy reports to her. She weeded out all the suicides, overdoses, natural cause deaths, and managed to get a meeting with the Inglewood Police Department detective Jeffrey Steinhoff. He told her about the DNA connection between the two recent victims and the victims in the 80s, and that ballistics connected all 9 victims as well as Anitra Washington. That's when she learned the other specific that tied the cases. The murderer left his saliva on many of the victims' breasts.
Okay.
Lonnie's friend Gary, we all remember Gary.
Oh my God. Tell me he comes in and goes, oh, Lonnie, a tit man. Like, tell me. Tell me he does.
You're very close. The quote is, Lonnie was a breast man.
I feel like I've seen inside Gary's mind, and I know where he's going. I'm disappointed he didn't say tit, but fine.
He went on to say a few things that involved that, but I was just going to let it go because it's just
Yep.
not
Yep.
needed to be repeated.
Mhm.
But let's just say you're right. So later during his trial, after Lonnie was caught, there was actually a video that he had shown that was shown in court. They believed that the woman in the video did not know that she was being filmed at the time, and it did show Lonnie engaging in that with this woman, and that was showing proof that this is obviously how his saliva DNA could have gotten on multiple victims' breasts. So at the time, Detective Steinhoff also said the major suspect in the case was a man named Roger Houseman, a former pimp with the nickname Super Honky, but the DNA cleared him from the cases. That wasn't important to include, but I couldn't resist saying Super Honky.
Okay. Yeah. I like it a lot.
Thank you. So this DNA evidence is how the connection of the serial killer was officially made, and Christine felt that the story should be shared. The killer was still out there. He's killing again, but police wanted to wait. So you remember Lonnie's BFF, Ray Davis. Ray says that Lonnie had a mattress in the back of his van, as we know, and he saw a girl in there with Lonnie. He said she was around maybe 25 years old. He described her as a hooker. He said she used to walk a street not far from where Lonnie lived. Ray asked Lonnie about her. He said it was his girl. Ray said, no, that's a hooker. Lonnie said, no. Ray says he doesn't know what they were doing in the van, but after that day, he never saw that girl again. On January 1st, 2007, a homeless man was going through a dumpster. He tears through a trash bag and unfortunately sees a hand. This was the hand of Janisa Peters, and she was that sex worker that Ray saw. There was a bullet wound to her back, which experts say, and this is truly, truly awful, the bullet would have paralyzed her but not killed her, and she sadly would have asphyxiated in the bag that she was put in. That's how she would have died.
God.
Now, the garbage bag, was zip tied closed. There was no DNA on her body, but guess where there was DNA? Well, he's got to put that zip tie in his mouth as he's. So that DNA also matched the women from the 80s and these two new cases from the 2000s. So now the LAPD think maybe something needs to be done now. I mean, at this point, it's 2007. April 27th, 2007, cold case supervisor Dennis Kilcoyne is like, we have 10 murders and an attempted. The police chief wanted to go public, but Dennis said, no, they needed to wait, keep it quiet for a bit. So he talked the chief out of doing press conferences. He also appointed Detective Cliff Shepard to the case. 2008, they have the DNA profile. They run it through the convicted felon data bank, but there's no matches. And they need evidence, but they say it's like going through haystacks for a needle. So May 12th, 2008, Detective Cliff Shepard came across an article about something called familial testing. Now, if people have listened to our latest happy hour on our Patreon, go to patreon.com/truecrimeandcocktails to find out more about signing up. You'll know that familial testing is something very controversial. At the time, in 2008, California governor had approved this controversial test, which basically allows police to broaden a DNA search to include close relatives of crime scene suspects. So when DNA gets uploaded into the convicted felon database, if it doesn't get a match, this is a second search that would then match that DNA of a suspect to anybody who's a convicted felon and has a partial DNA match, which means it would match to a brother, an uncle, or a father. Now, this has been used in England since 2002, but at the time it had not been used in the US because it brings up ethical concerns about privacy, etc. So Detective Shepard and his team flew to meet Jill Spriggs. She was the bureau chief with the California Department of Justice. They explained the case to her, and 2 weeks later, they followed up by putting in a formal request. But before anything could happen officially, a special software program had to be built. So again, they had to wait. So back to Christine Pelisek. She turned her pestering onto Cliff Shepard now. And in the summer of 2008, he revealed to her that there had been another victim. The victim, of course, who was Janisa Peters, but he did not give Christine any details at the time. So she goes back to the coroner's office, talks to Ed Winter. He manages to give her some autopsy reports. She didn't let on that she already knew there was another victim tied to the others. But when she got those autopsy reports, Janisha was the one that stood out to her. So she didn't know any of the details about who this was, but when she was pouring through them, she just like her gut, she was like, it's this woman. This woman, again, I love her style. She gets a meeting with Dennis Kilcoyne. I'll remind you, Dennis, of course, is the one who was like, we need to be quiet. Let's not do any press conferences. She gets a meeting with him a few days later and told him point blank, I want to write a story about Janisha Peters. So she's got this information. He doesn't know how she got it, right? He, of course, in the moment, gun to his head, confirmed, yes, Janisha was linked to the other deaths through DNA. But he also told Christine that he wanted to keep the task force that he had been, it was secret task force, had been working the case for some time. But he wanted to keep that secret because he didn't want the killer to know if they were onto him. He was worried that the killer would go into hiding and they'd never find him. But then he also admitted to Christine they were no closer to solving the case than the cops were back in the 80s. She then brought up the familial DNA option, and he said no comment. So I love that she's just like dropping truth bombs on Dennis Kilcoyne, who must have been like, how does this woman have all this information? I love it. So what does Christine do? She calls up the families of the victims and says, do you realize that there's a serial killer? Because the police haven't talked about it publicly. And they say, no, obviously, we've never been told anything in over 2 decades. So she did want to write a story about all of the victims. And, you know, again, they all confirmed police had never contacted them, ever suggesting a serial killer could have been involved. And on August 28th, 2008, Christine ran the story called The Grim Sleeper Returns. Her editor, Jill Stewart, wanted to give him a name like Zodiac Killer, whatever. She wanted to give him a new name. And they agreed on the Grim Sleeper because they felt it embodied a killer who took a 13-and-a-half-year break between his murder sprees. So it was this article that broke the story that Janisha had been killed by the same serial killer that had been active in the 80s. It also broke that familial testing was going to be used. It broke everything, and it lit a fire under those cops. A week after the story ran, city council all of a sudden offered a $500,000 reward, the largest in the city's history, I might add, for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the Grim Sleeper. The police finally held press conferences and set up a confidential tip line. What I'm saying is Christine Pelishek gets shit done. By
Just
the way,
let women get involved in things.
Well, yeah, for God's sake. So the police also finally released the sketch that Anitria Peters had done 20 years prior, I believe. And now they also released 2 age-progressed versions of it. And by the way, her first one, we'll put a picture up, Instagram and truecrimeandcocktails.com. It looks exactly like him. The idea that they were suggesting that she was an unreliable witness, it just burns me so hard because it was like, no, she described him exactly. So it's just, I hate that they gaslit her that way, in a way about her own attacker. Like, I can't think about it too much because it makes me rage. Then, and this is an interesting move, the police released the 911 call from the Barbara Ware case, but they didn't say anything about it being Lonnie on the call. That being said, the family had never been told there was a call, and they learned about it when they saw it on TV. Barbara's stepmom, who was very involved throughout the years in the case, she, I believe, attended every single day in court when that came time. She said she heard about it on TV for the first time in 2008. Dennis Kilcoyne, you remember him? Let's not say anything. Let's keep our mouths shut.
Of course.
He agrees it was wrong that that's how she found out. I think that's the understatement of the century. Dennis. Dennis then says they set up the tip line, but quote, the phones didn't ring. There was no information being given. But, you know, it's interesting because Christine Pelishek in her book, which I've read, that's right, I took a page from Christy's book. I learned it from you, The Grim Sleeper. Great book. She said that after all of this came out, she was getting tons of tips. Now, granted, none of them necessarily led to anything, but I don't know whether he was using a figure of speech or saying literally no one called. I hope he was just using a figure of speech because obviously people called. Cut to June 30th, 2010. Jill Spriggs, you'll remember her. She calls Dennis Kilcoyne and says someone needs to pick her up from the airport. She's bringing something and she'll need a conference room waiting. He asks if there was a DNA hit. She says she can't say. She comes in with a letter that states that Christopher Franklin, age 28 at the time, convicted of a felony firearms charge, was a familial hit with the Grim Sleeper DNA. Obviously, this is Lonnie's son, Christopher John Franklin. So he got caught. because his DNA matched his son's that was in the system because he did have a felony firearms conviction. Christopher says he's always in trouble for something. He claims that the gun that he did get convicted over was just not registered yet at the time of his arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know whether we believe that. Police obviously knew he was too young to be the killer, but they also knew that he had a living father. Now, keep in mind, and this is again the system that just Lonnie had 15 previous felony convictions at the time. He had 4 or 5 for receiving stolen property. He had 5 for grand theft auto. He had 2 for battery. And he had 1 for assault with force likely to produce great bodily injury and 1 for false imprisonment. But not at any point did his DNA get taken because at that time, you only had to give your DNA if you were a convicted sex offender. Now, that has obviously changed because by the time Christopher ended up with a felony charge, if you've convicted any felony now, they'll take your DNA. And I just want to say, I know that maybe people think that's a controversial thing, but I do think that this is an example because he had 15 felony charges that if his DNA had been taken at any point, in any point, lives would have literally been saved. That is a tangible example of how this isn't even talking about the familial DNA debate. We're taking that off the table for a second. But it's talking about, in my opinion, that I think it is good that they're getting DNA from anybody convicted of a felony because in this case, it would have saved lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we really have full time to get into it, but my belief on the familial DNA, do it.
Oh,
Do it.
well, and again, this is another great example. If it hadn't happened, who knows what would Lonnie have kept killing?
Oh, he wasn't going to stop.
I don't think he was going to stop either. So police look up Lonnie's address and immediately cross-reference the truly stunning proximity to the places where the bodies were found. They were so close to his house. He was not going far, truly. Again, it makes you want to scream. Within 90 minutes, they had surveillance on Lonnie, but they can't go on his property at this point. They can't ask to swab him for DNA. They can't arrest him without proof. So now they've decided they're going to follow him and they're going to collect something he's discarded with his DNA on it. And this is where things get wacky and wild. July 5th, 2010. It's a Monday. A Monday. Oh, wow.
Oh
boy.
I like
this Monday. We're going to Costco's. You're going to go to Costco's to get some of those pigs in blankets.
I like it a lot. I like what's happening right now.
Staring in a pool of madness. Okay. So Lonnie picks up Sonia, which is his last known girlfriend. He had like 4 to 5 girlfriends over the years, while he was married and also having sex with so many women and doing so many terrible things. So they go to a place called John's Incredible Pizza for a kid's birthday party. Police detectives go in, they explain to the manager what's going on, and then they ask permission from the manager, can one of our detectives dress up as an employee of this restaurant to collect Lonnie's garbage? The manager says yes, and so this police detective goes undercover as a busboy. He collected utensils, discarded food, anything he could get. Dennis Kilcoyne took it from there himself to the lab personally, and then it was going to be a couple of days waiting for the results. The whole time they kept Lonnie under surveillance. I guess he didn't do anything untoward during that time. 2 days later, I'm assuming it must be the early hours, Dennis got a text message from the lab director. It simply said 3 words, he's your guy.
Oh, I thought it's a match.
I also didn't know you could, is it professional to send that in a text? I think that's a call. Anyway, call me crazy. DNA had been pulled from hardened cheese on a pizza crust and 2 napkins. The DNA on his utensils were unusable as the salad dressing was too oily and made the DNA impossible to pull.
Well, the lesson here, kids, is eat your crusts.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to get away with murder, sure.
Yeah.
Barbara's oral swab was a match. She was the one from the 911 call. Was a match to Lonnie that was stated to be a 1 in 11 quintillion match. That's a number I've never even heard before. quintillion.
Wow.
I thought that was amazing. So this is a serial killer who has been killing on and off for 25 years. This is the smoking gun. I have to say, I find it very ironic that garbage is what ended up catching the garbage man.
Yeah. And I like the advertisement that this is for John's Incredible Pizza, because not only can you have a child's birthday party there, they will happily work with the police to undermine your rights. So,
well, it's funny you mention rights, because Lonnie's right. Lonnie's lawyers argued that his DNA was seized in a way that violated his Fourth Amendment rights. They felt that the busboy was going to mix. They said that Lonnie thought he had an understanding that busboy was going to mix his garbage with the rest of the trash, and that it would be thrown away collectively with other people's trash. The judge in the case said, and I wrote this down because I love it so much, quote, "I've never heard of the term informed consent when it comes to a restaurant and eating food and having your items cleared from the table. That's really out there. I'm going to find that once the items are taken from the table, he no longer had Fourth Amendment interest in those items anymore."
yeah.
Mm-hmm. His lawyers were also accused of stalling. Don't worry, we're going to get into the court case before we wrap up. His one lawyer, who's named Seymour Amster, threw a pen during trial. There's video of it. He yelled. He also said at one point, "If the court thinks someone else can do this faster, take me off the case." I mean, it was dramatics at best. So the same day that the DNA match comes back as a match, July 7th, 2010, police raid Lonnie's house and arrest him. Lonnie was outside. His friend, his BFF, his bestie, Ray Davis, heard vans, and he said all these guys jumped out with AK-47s wearing helmets. They blocked off the entire street. Trucks came, and that's when they started questioning Ray about Lonnie. He said he couldn't believe it was about murders. Lonnie, on the other hand, had no reaction, no backtalk, no questioning why he was arrested, nothing. In his interrogation, the police would show him a picture of the victim, and he would say something like, "I don't know her." And then he said, "I know a lot of people, but I don't know her. I want to remind you on that 911 call when they said, 'Do you want to give your name?' He said, 'I know a lot of people.'" Exact same wording. The detectives would tell him, your DNA was identified in relation to this person's death. He still would not react. Dennis Kilcoyne said it was like his soul was dead. There was nothing there. They showed him a picture of Bernicia, excuse me. Lonnie said, "Wow, she looks heavy set." Then he laughed. The cop said, "What?" And Lonnie said, "Oh, I just said she looked fat." This isn't an interrogation where you're being told that they know you murdered all these people. And you're just going to take a moment to laugh and body shame a dead woman? I mean, brazen, bold, callous. There's not enough adjectives. So at this point, the police are like, "Okay, let's take a step back. Do you understand what DNA is?" And he says that he does. And they go through, they explain it very, making sure that it's like, "You understand that we have your DNA on these bodies." And he said, "Yeah, I understand that, but I don't know these people." They were like, "So what? Did you just have a bad day? Like, are you like, what's going on? Are you just having some bad luck right now?" He says he has no explanation. Dennis Kilcoyne says he has 4 kids. He knows when someone is lying to him. Lonnie says, "I haven't killed anybody," and he would not confess. Now, in this case, Dennis Kilcoyne wanted the family members to know first before the press. He did call the families to come in. I will say thank you, Dennis, for doing the right thing once. Now, LAPD Detective Darren Dupree, you may know his name from, I don't know, the Biggie Task Force. Thank you very much.
Again, I like
crossover.
I like the crossover. I like the players that come back, because again, it just feels like we're at the office. Another person's coming in and we're just like, "Hey, it's our coworker."
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's nice. Yeah, he's got his coffee in his hand. He's got his, he's got his like a world's greatest dad mug or something. I don't know if he's a dad or a good dad. He could be a bad dad. I don't know.
I like how quickly that spiraled.
I just don't want people coming for me. I don't want them being like, "There's proof that he's been an abuser." Like, I don't know him. I didn't look into him. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
I don't know.
They can come for you, but they got to get through me.
Bless it. So Detective Dupree is tasked with searching Lonnie's house, and he said the garages were where they hit pay dirt. Women in photos everywhere, more and more and more, hidden in different places in the garage. Police said they found more than 1,000 photos and videotapes of women and teenage girls, as I mentioned before. And this is what's so chilling, they found a picture of Anitra laying in the car after he had shot her. It does appear to be the interior of a Pinto. She is passed out. I mean, again, this poor woman who for decades was basically not believed or brushed aside. What vindication. In the house, they found 2 small 25 caliber automatic pistols. One of them was tested and was connected to Janisha Peters' murder. The police, as I've stated before, they found 180 women in photographs that couldn't be identified. So they made these giant posters. Many of the women were semi-nude in these photos. Many of them looked drugged or dead. They released this to the public, and many people did come forward. And eventually it was only narrowed to 30 people that were not identified, 30 women, which is still way too many. But it is nice, at least, that many people were identified from that. There is a belief, obviously, there could be even more victims. I do tend to be of that mindset because I don't believe that, I just don't believe that this has an end for him. Now, there was a woman named Pam Brooks, and she worked with Nick Broomfield in the documentary, Tales of a Grim Sleeper. And she went by the composite and she was like, listen, I know a lot of these women because she had worked on the streets herself at a time. And so she agreed to go with Nick around the area to try and find these women that had not been identified yet from the composite.
Sure.
And so, she talks a lot in the documentary, very, very kind of, matter of factly about what she was going through at the time, how she had gotten, hooked on drugs, all of those kinds of things. She talks about how she had an experience with Lonnie herself. She said that she had been with him a few times, but the last time she said she felt something was wrong. He called her bitch, and she called him out. She was like, what do you like? Don't call me bitch, whatever. And then he said, you never do what I really want you to do. And then she apparently said, because I'm not a motherfucking dog, bitch, which I thought was amazing on Pam's part.
Oh, I love Pam.
I know. And then she was like, drop me off, like, or whatever. She just took off. So this is also like an interesting, Pam's story is really interesting because at the time of the documentary, she was living alone. She was 4 years sober. She was completely off crack. She was divorced. She obviously knew the girls on the street because she had done that work herself. But she had also at that time been turned down for a job as a bus driver because she did have a prior felony conviction for possession of drugs. I want to remind you, this means she cannot vote for the rest of her life. She can never get food stamps. She can never qualify for public housing. And as I've said, it's very difficult for her to get a job. And I just want to reiterate again, the system, this is somebody who she was hooked on drugs. She got caught with possession. So this isn't even, if you want to talk about, we can get into whatever, we don't have time. But my point being is, this is someone who served her time. She did clean up her act, legit. Got sober, whatever. She has no resources. What is about the system that is apparently supposed to rehabilitate you and supposed to, you do your time, you pay your debt to society and then you're supposed to come out. What does this woman have available to her? It's designed to keep people desperate, to keep people reoffending, to keep people in the system, to keep the for-profit prisons full of people. Just saying. So she did talk about Lonnie's obsession with taking pictures of all of the encounters he had with women. Obviously, all the Polaroids. Then, of course, there was cell phone photos, videos. He had a video camera, etc. She said he liked snapping pics. He would say, close your eyes, bend over, pop your butt. Freaky shit. She said, he's just a freaky motherfucker. And then she said, she's just lucky that she got away. Which I think is true. She said she knew some of the women in the photos. The first one she found was Delashon, which I will remind you was not a victim, but of course was Christopher's high school girlfriend.
Right.
Now, Delashawn, again, I had some notes about her. Yeah. So she was number 147 in the police photos because they were all numbered. Um, she said she spent her entire 11th grade summer in the house in question where they lived. She
Oh.
went on vacations, funerals. She was with the whole family. The family seemed completely normal to her, a typical family. She said Mr. Franklin didn't work. He was always at home. But if you needed anything, just ask him. Don't ask him how he got it, but he would get it. A TV, a car, a part for your car. However he got it, you'd never know. Don't question him about how. He went above and beyond to help you. It makes no sense to me that he would kill women. But in any conversation, something perverted would come out. He's just a horny old man. That's just who he was. That's how everybody looked at him. Then she goes on to say, well, there was a few times when she and Christopher were hooking up that he would listen at the door to his son and his son's girlfriend hooking up. She said, I guess he seemed like a pervert, seriously. So again, I just love how everybody starts out saying he was this great guy and then ends up telling these stories that it's like, do you hear yourself? She also said that the lights were always off at the house. This I find very interesting. She said it was always very dim in the hallways and in the back. They would open the kitchen and living room blinds, but there was tea candles in the bathroom. There was always porn magazines beside the toilet in the bathroom. At night, she said he would leave. She said he had a Pinto. She said the backyard was junky. The house was junky. There was stuff everywhere. She knew about the shoebox of photos in the garage. She said, oh, he would be laughing with his buddies, passing it around. She said he always had 3 cell phones. And when she asked why, he said one for business, one personal, and one for hoes / his crackheads. She said he never showed her pictures. But he did say that he had a white church van, and in the glove box, there was a stack of Polaroids and a pair of women's lace panties. One time, I can't remember whether she said it was him or Christopher said, can you go in the glove box and get a screwdriver? She opened it, saw the Polaroids, saw the panties, pulled out the screwdriver, closed it, said she didn't think anything of it. Okay. Then to describe Chris, she said, if Chris didn't like you, he would attack you, stab you, pull a gun on you, would not think twice about it. She said she thought it was awesome. She had a boyfriend who was crazy, but later she realized, oh no, he's legit crazy. She says she thinks he got it from his dad because he would drive around with a fully loaded gun on his lap. That's Christopher we're talking about there. So, I mean, again, I love that she's like normal family with porn magazines and Polaroids of naked women and panties in a glove box. Normal family.
Yeah.
Stole things. Anything you wanted. Don't ask him where he got it. Normal family.
And
listened to his son having sex with me. Normal family.
And the screwdriver found in the glove box, was that the screwdriver he used earlier? Okay. Well, I know. I'm not getting into the detail. I'm just pointing out that I was listening.
I appreciate it. It just, I can't. It just makes me want to throw up. Okay. So, many of the other women Pam recognized from the composite were homeless. So she and Nick in the documentary go out on the street. She managed to find 7 of the women over the course of the documentary, as well as one other survivor who was not in the photographs. She was just questioning people. And this woman was like, oh, yeah, I know him. Exactly. So originally it was thought that Anitria Washington was the only survivor of Lonnie's. And while these other women weren't shot like she was, I personally think that they were survivors and that it's important to include parts of their stories because, again, I think that it's important for, again, the survivors, the victims. We don't call them victims in this case, I know, but it's bad. The first woman, Roxanne, she was not in the photos as far as I know. But she said Lonnie paid her $40 for a blowjob. But when he wanted her to go to his house to go to the garage, she said no. She felt weird about it. She said that her friend Brenda, that he did rape her and cut her throat. It didn't kill her. But because of that, she was very scared of him. And then she put together, oh my God, that was the same guy. Now, Brenda was too scared to speak on camera in the documentary, but Roxanne also said she would look at Lonnie and said that she felt that he did have an evil kind of look to him. Next, a woman named Lily. Who is Lily? Christopher's childhood nanny.
Oh.
She is sadly now homeless. She lives on the streets, or she was at the time of the documentary. She says that when Christopher was a kid, he said his dad would have ladies in the house and that he would watch them through a peephole.
Mm.
Christopher not being set up for success. Lonnie would pick up Christopher and ask Lily to come to the car to show her something. So she'd leave him in the house, and then he'd say he wanted her to wear panties, stockings, heels, that he wanted to tie her up, to take pictures of her. She called it nasty. This was all, again, while she was babysitting. But she says she was an addict and would do whatever it took at the time for drugs. There was things that he said he wanted to do. She would say no, that she didn't like it. She also said that he wanted to, trigger warning, this is graphic. She also said that he wanted to have anal sex with her, but put a dog collar around her neck and have sex with her like she was a dog. She would do it because she was desperate for the money to get drugs. Again, she was an addict, but after a while, she said it got very sickening to her and she just couldn't babysit Chris anymore because she couldn't deal with Lonnie. She said that she really did want to report him, but she did not feel she could go to the police because of her own addiction issues, which I understand. But I get it.
Now,
Next,
I'm not blaming her in any way. I just want to know, where was Sylvia at this point when Christopher had a nanny? I mean, and I assume that this was a point when Lonnie was on disability full time.
well, it may or may not have been, though. He wouldn't have been on disability full time until 91. Christopher was born in 81, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
it may have been younger, and Sylvia did work. So it is feasible
That's
that
true.
they did need a babysitter in the day.
I just find it, well, again, I am not blaming either woman. The only person I blame in this is Lonnie, and just
Yes.
the idea that the son watched things.
I
I am
know.
concerned about the son being brought up again later in the story.
Well, actually, I don't know that he is. What am I saying? Of course he is, but we're mostly okay in terms of what I could find.
Oh,
Thank
great.
God. Thank God. Next was a woman named Mikey. She was photo number 1. She said she fell asleep because he gave her drugs. This was 2007. So again, that proves I don't think he was going to stop anytime. Again, she said she was fully in an addiction mindset at the time. She would have done anything at the time. Next was a woman named Cookie. She said she lived on the street since she was 18. She saw him on and off for about 6 months. She said he was nasty. She said at first things were normal. Then he started doing weird things, then weirder things. And then, and this was chilling, he would pay her to get other girls. She said she brought him 4 girls and she never saw any of them again after that.
Oh.
She also said she never talked to the police, I'm sure out of fear. The next, there's 4 anonymous women. One said she was not a prostitute, but she did meet this man. He said, do you want to get high? Do you want to have some money? She was like, okay, maybe this was kind of her first experience with that kind of thing, but she felt uncomfortable because he locked her in a room. Another said he was into really weird stuff. He scared her. She also said that she keeps Visine on her because it puts people to sleep. Apparently it really works. So she had him go get a drink and then she slipped some into his drink and apparently it knocked him out and she escaped.
No way. I thought it only gave you the runs.
I don't know if this is true or not, but she swears by it. Another anonymous woman says she was a drug addict. He showed her money, said that he wanted a blowjob. She did, but he wouldn't give her the money. Then he got aggressive. She was trying to get the money. He said no, and she panicked and ran buck naked. And then a woman found her and took her to a friend's house in the middle of the night. This last one, not graphic, partially I'm confused. But then also this is the one that like cut me to my core. So she said that at the time she tried to help him out of his pants, but she couldn't. She said it was like picking up an egg. I don't know what that means. That one, that vision, I don't know what that means. But then,
like a raw egg?
That's it. I thought an egg in a shell. I think she's talking about his junk, and I think you're right. That it was, I think she's saying
that it was sloppy.
I think she was saying it was flaccid, is what
Yeah.
I think she's saying. Thank you for explaining that to me. I love that I've been thinking about this for days. Anyway, but then, and this is where it gets so bizarre. She said it was like he had been in a freezer. She said his body was physically cold, which I thought was so, I don't mean the pun, but chilling. Um, she said she couldn't help him. I think, again, this is regarding the maybe him being flaccid,
The egg dick.
the egg dick. Thank you. And then she said this, and this is where, again, this just cut me so deep. She said, I didn't mock his body. I didn't insult him. And you want to kill me? Yeah, okay, I was out there. That doesn't mean I'm nothing. That doesn't mean I'm nothing. Like I'm a piece of trash. I was trapped. That was not the life I wanted. I just thought that was like so powerful. Like just such a reminder too that it's like, do you think that this is a, and I know, and I'm not, there are sex workers that love that work, and this is not me degrading their work at all. But in a lot of these women's cases, they were choosing this work as a way to make money or a way to get drugs or a way to make money to get drugs because they felt like they had no other options because they were deep into addiction. I'm not speaking to sex workers who do that because they feel empowered and that's the work that they want to do. And that's, God bless their own choices. Again, like she's speaking to what I think a lot of these people were experiencing at that time. I don't know that there was a lot of the women that he was handling that were doing this because they thought that this was an empowering life choice. They were doing this a lot of the time because they were deep into crack addiction and desperate and needing money, etc., or felt like they had no other options, etc. And that statement just was like so powerful to me because it's so true. All of that being said, it doesn't mean that their lives have less value. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated seriously by the police, by everybody else. It's, it's just so overwhelming. And that's why I also thought it was important to include this detail. The police in the past have used the term NHI to describe the murders of prostitutes and drug addicts. NHI stands for no human involved. And I just think that really speaks to why so much of this resonated with me, why I thought it was important to talk about this case. Again, I had never heard of this case before. And really that last woman, again, she was anonymous, as far as I could tell. She said it wasn't the life she wanted, but it doesn't mean that she's nothing. And that is so truthful. I just think that plain and simply, that's exactly it. It's like, yes, she was out there. It wasn't the life she wanted, but it doesn't mean she's nothing. And then the last thing I wanted to say on that note was Pam then went on to remind viewers at the end of that documentary, also I thought was powerful, was that just because Lonnie is caught doesn't mean it's over. There's another motherfucker out there as sick as he is. And I think to that point, she's right, because as we know, this other person they thought was a serial killer was multiple men committing the exact same crime at the exact same time. It's so overwhelming. And the fact that it was, certainly again in the 80s, it was just, the numbers are so staggering. It was, yeah. So tough one indeed. Now, Christopher, I said we'd talk about him. I didn't lie. Everyone said that he was the closest person to Lonnie. Richard said that he was always with Lonnie until he moved out, that he was involved in his dad's business. Richard doesn't think it's possible that Chris couldn't have known what was going on. He thinks he should have been suspicious at least. But again, I don't know how much credibility I give to Richard or Gary or Jerry or any of them in terms of pointing fingers. I don't know. When Chris was asked, he said being with his dad was not fun. He said at 3 a.m. they'd be pushing stolen cars down the street. He said he'd get beatings, whippings from hell. He saw things that he shouldn't growing up. My dad's a perv, man. Everybody knows that's Lonnie. Now he knows that things were not right back then. But Chris also says that he did feel guilty when Lonnie got arrested. It was because of his DNA. He does feel guilt about it. But then he says, who would want to meet someone like that on the street? Meaning his dad. He said, it's also hard for me to tell people, oh, by the way, my dad's a serial killer. I don't know if he's talking about dating in that context, but listen, if you thought online dating was hard before, I can have a little bit of compassion. for that. So Chris said that his dad also, and this is where it gets real crazy.
Mm.
He said his dad has a lot of fans in law enforcement who actually admired him for, quote, cleaning up the streets. He said there's weirdos in the street, weirdos in the jail system, a lot of fans, a lot of fan mail. He said he spoke to sheriffs who'd be like, whoa, you're that guy's son? Dude, that's fucking crazy. He said they're all pumped up. And he's like, can you please put me in protective custody away from you and all the other fools out there? Chris said he felt guilty for 3 years for his dad getting caught. He said people are mean. He's from a world where there are no snitches. And he said ultimately, if he had known, he wouldn't have told. A few of his family members have said that he turned his dad in. He described his family as cold. I mean, again, he didn't turn him in. He didn't go to
No.
the police and said, my dad did this. But I also love that he said that if he had known, he wouldn't have done that. So he describes at the time of the raid, they were both handcuffed, Lonnie and Chris, shackled head to toe. And he said they probably would have shot us both if they had good cheddar. I don't know really what that means. But in terms of that moment, he said it was silence. He said that his dad speaks in a different world. It's like he's not even there for the murders. It's like he's not even in there for the murders. In prison, oh my God, brain fart. It's like he's not even in prison for the murders. It's like he thinks he's in there for domestic violence or receiving stolen property. And that bothers Chris, that he just treats it like he's just not even acknowledging the fact that the murders happened or that he's been charged with it or convicted of it. When asked if Lonnie ever apologized to Chris, Chris was shocked at the implication that he ever would, and obviously said no, he hadn't. Then he goes on to say, again, this is so conflicting. I lost my best friend, man. We're in two different places. Nothing I can talk to him about now. I just try to communicate with him. I'm still his son. Nothing can change that. He said his dad sometimes talked at the time of the trial about how the attorneys are trying to do what they could to clear his name, like he's innocent. And he said, overall, it's just a whole mind game. So those quotes were all taken from seeing him talk in documentaries. That wasn't like me pulling quotes from the internet or books.
Right.
So it was interesting to me that they were so conflicting, that it was like, he was a bad guy. He shouldn't be on the streets, but I wouldn't have turned him in. Like and I don't know. Part of me feels for him that I feel like he was not really set up well in life. He was not really raised well, but then I also don't want to necessarily give him too much credit. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, he also is this not the guy who, I mean, he was just saying through you that growing up was really tough
Yes.
with his dad. But then he's the same guy that brought like multiple guys to beat one of the friends of his dad for
Great point.
speaking negatively about his dad.
Yeah.
So it's so crazy to me that it's like it was really tough. There was a lot of things like he beat me, but his loyalty to his father
I know. It's weird, right?
is so strong that it's like, oh, I was the reason he got caught. Well, I feel guilty. I never would have turned him in. It's like,
I know.
and the fan mail.
Oh,
I can't. I can't.
know. But again, he lived at this very distinctive house. It was very open where he lived, and Chris still lived there. So, I mean, people could send it. So, a couple of things I want to hit very quickly. Then we'll talk about the court case and we're out. But motives. Obviously, I've talked about brain trauma and it's linked to serial killers.
Yes.
Again, that is something that is well known, that I can post more about. I believe there was also a study that said something like all serial killers have those tendencies. They may not have had brain trauma, but they do have the tendencies of someone who has had brain trauma or whatever. Anyway, I'll post the link. Now, here's something interesting. A former friend of Lonnie's gave a hint about what could have triggered Lonnie's aggression towards women in the first place, saying his first wife was on crack cocaine. He had given her money to pay the bills, but he came home. There were youngsters in the house, and she was there smoking crack. That's what set him off. But any other report on his first wife or who she even was is not there. Sylvia, of course, was called loyal, devoutly Christian. I will also add, Sylvia refused to cooperate with the police when Lonnie was arrested. She regularly visited him in jail, but when he was convicted, she then started to pull away. So it's interesting to me that she was willing to stand by her man, but then when it came out that he had been convicted, she was like, okay, I'm out. So, you know, it's also interesting too that she, I guess, hung on to the belief innocent until proven guilty. I don't know. Um, when he was convicted in 2016, it says, yeah, that she and the entire family did take a step back. Now, his first wife, I dug and dug and dug. I mean, really, really searched long and hard. And boy, oh boy, I thought I found her.
Of course.
There
Of
was a
course.
Lonnie David Franklin Jr. who was born in the same year as the Grim Sleeper, who got married to a woman in Texas in 1974. But as we remember, in January 1972, he had deployed overseas to Germany. And in April of 1974, he did attack Ingrid W. The trial, I will remind you, was in Germany in November and December 1974. He was convicted in December 2074. He was in prison in Germany until May 1975, I believe, when he was transferred to Fort Jackson. 1976, when he was transferred to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where he got his general discharge. So is it possible that he could have gone home to America in the summer of 1974 and got married? I don't think so. The license was issued August 30th, 1974. The wedding happened September 12th, 1974. It feels unlikely to me that the German government would have allowed him to travel out of country if he was in custody for a rape and a kidnapping. I
Right.
don't know what the rules are. I can't say it's impossible, but if he did get to America and met a woman in Texas and got married, why would he have ever gone back to Germany? Like, wouldn't he have just gone on the run?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we also know, because I'm desperate to figure out this first wife. He was 1 month of turning shy. Sorry, 1 month of turning shy. That's where we're at. 1 month shy of turning 19 when he joined the Army in 1971. He did basic training at Fort Ord in Monterey Bay, California, and then deployed overseas in January 1972. Is it possible that this first wife could be a reference to someone he dated prior to age 19? Like, is this a high school girlfriend? Because there's no record of his marriage to Sylvia or his divorce. I'm assuming that they got divorced around 2017 after his conviction. I don't know, but there's no record of their marriage. And I scoured. So is it possible that these aren't legal marriages? Are these marriages just not ever filed? Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Is it possible this first wife was a high school girlfriend? It's said that he met and married Sylvia soon after getting discharged in May 1976, and that they had their first child in December 1978. So then I ran some checks. Sylvia was born January 15th, 1957. I have that confirmed. So if she met Lonnie when she was 21, and I have that from a couple of sources that she was 21, that would mean that they met in 1978. Now he was back in LA summer 76. So it is possible that he could have met somebody between the summer of 76 and 1978 and then got married, quote unquote, whether it was a legal marriage or not. There could have been this first wife in 76 or 77 is my point. But then I also toyed with the idea, what if there was no first wife? What if this was just a story that he told? None of his friends that I saw interviewed in any of the documentaries, books, articles I read, no one mentioned ever having met this woman. They only talked about this story that Lonnie told about how she was this terrible drug addict. She took his money and wouldn't pay the bills, and there was kids crying, etc.
Whose kids?
Were they her kids from another relationship? That's what I assumed. Were they his kids? Did he have kids with her that he abandoned? I mean, that timeline is kind of tough for him to have had multiple kids with this person. He also had gonorrhea in 1972. We know that he deployed to Germany in January 1972. Could it have been from a woman he dated once he got to Germany? Or a high school girlfriend before he left, gave it to him in 71, and then it was found in 72? I mean, all of this to say, I also toyed with, is this person, this first wife he refers to, like an amalgamation for him in his own mind? Is Ingrid W. a part of this person? Is he so angry that he trusted her? He believed that she actually liked him. He called her, or right? Like she got his
Right.
number. He met her for the date. So she would have called him, not the other way around, excuse me. But you know what I'm saying? And then she double crossed him. Is she a part
Right.
of this quote first wife character that he's built as to why he hates women or what have you? Or is there a first wife plus Ingrid and that double cross plus whoever gave him the gonorrhea? You know, is this all building this kind of hatred? I also think it's interesting to note that the photographs of the attack on Ingrid W. feels like it has to have influenced his ultimate MO with all of the other attacks that he did. The fact that he was so obsessed with it feels like it has to have been connected. Um, it's just chilling to think about all of these other details. You know, like the idea that if a person really fights you or something, that if you let her go, she'll turn you in, like better to kill the person in the evidence. Like, I don't know how his mind went, you know?
Mm.
Then to get into the psychology very quickly, I did read someone's kind of take on this who said, um, they believe that given what they know about his history, about the victim demographic, about his need to collect trophies, including the photos, that he was probably both an anger retaliatory and anger excitation killer. He chose the victims that he did because they resembled a woman or several women that wronged him in the past, violating his victims as if directly harming them was an act of vengeance on these other women. His first wife, he said, was a drug addict. He had troubles with his second wife. He may have gotten an STD or had a bad experience with a girlfriend or a prostitute. He also experienced sexual pleasure from inflicting pain on his victims. Considering he habitually acted on his urges for years, it seems unlikely that he truly went on a 14-year killing hiatus. This person believes that he probably just changed his MO. So if there was people killed during that time and they didn't connect it to him, it could just be because he changed it up. Wasn't using the 25 caliber, was doing something else, was strangling them, was choking them, was doing, you know, who knows? Very quickly, because this is wild. These details I had to hit. I found some stuff. We're going to go out with a bang, folks. The court case. First of all, Lonnie entered court pre-trial carrying a Nora Roberts romance novel in his hand. I don't know whether that was a show, like he's a romantic. If it is, gross.
Like he just thought, this is going to be so boring. Now's the time. Catch up on my Nora.
Or his lawyers were like, come in reading a romance novel. It'll make you look like a nice old man. It'll make you look like you love romance, which is sick.
Yeah. Like if you're going to try and make him look like a nice old man, put like a pencil in his pocket and give him a crossword book. Like a Nora Roberts.
Give him a Sudoku. Come on.
Yeah, it seems too much.
So, as I said before, his lawyers were accused of stalling in the case. Seymour Amster had 12 death penalty cases on his resume at that point, so he makes sense. But his other lawyer was a woman named Luisa Pensati. She was a former producer of the Richard Simmons Show, who took Lonnie's case pro bono. Many wondered why. She grew up in LA. She started by teaching elementary school, then decided it wasn't for her. Before she became a criminal defense lawyer, she was a building contractor, a real estate agent, dabbled as an actor, was an assistant to a movie producer, and was a publicist not only to Sammy Davis Jr., but also Robin Williams, among other stars.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Louisa had been disciplined by the California State Bar and was put on a year's probation in May 2013 for failure to perform legal services with competence. Apparently, she had not given back unearned fees and had also filed a motion on behalf of a client she was no longer representing.
Oh, boy.
So she was the one who brought Seymour Amster into the case because she realized that he had experience with death penalty cases and she'd never done any. So maybe that made sense. And they already knew each other because they shared a legal office in Van Nuys, California prior to this. Just not an affluent neighborhood, folks. Anyway, so you just think of lawyers being like Beverly Hills and like whatever.
Sure.
That is not. No shade to Van Nuys, but you know what I'm saying. So apparently, Louisa truly would believe in the innocence of her clients and was able to convey that to juries, and she could never lose. That's what Seymour Amster said about her. Now, this case took 5 years to get to trial. In year 4 of that delay, 2014, the case was brought to a standstill when a former employee of Louisa Pensanti was involved in a brutal decapitation.
Okay.
You can't make this shit up. Oh, so I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, a former employee of hers was killed? No. Oscar Bridges was a twice convicted child molester. At this time in 2014, he was arrested and in custody for the murder of a 21-year-old man named Robert Brewer, who had been found partially decapitated in a motel on South Vermont Avenue. At the time of his capture, Bridges was going by the alias Seth Silverman, which was a spin on the grim sleeper prosecutor Beth Silverman's name. He said he wanted to speak to a prosecutor about a lawyer he had once worked for who he said was doing illegal, unethical things. That lawyer, you guessed right, was Louisa Pensati. That's right. Her former employee was the killer who did the decapitation. She'd met Oscar in 2003 when she represented him after he failed to register as a sex offender. She later hired him to work for her. He alleged in a police interview that she illegally poached clients away from other attorneys, and he added put so much pressure on him that it led him to abuse drugs and alcohol, and led him to eventually kill Robert Brewer. He also alleged that she had likely illegally solicited the grim sleeper case. It gets wilder. Police wrote up the charges, presented them to the judge, Kathleen Kennedy. As we know, Kennedy also, she is no bullshit. We already know that from the other things we talked about. She said there was always suspicions about how Louisa had gotten this case, but that no one had ever given any evidence of wrongdoing. She also added that other lawyers had complained about Louisa poaching clients and that she did very little in the grim sleeper case. The judge was said she basically states her name and that's it. So Judge Kennedy was concerned that Pensati was probably not a competent attorney, but she also realized that these accusations were coming from a child molester / murderer who also had an axe to grind, potentially. So she had to have a hearing with Lonnie, his lawyers, and the prosecution lawyers, providing them all with a transcript of this killer's 7-hour interview. That's right, Oscar did a 7-hour interview with the police. She also addressed Lonnie specifically, saying she did not have an opinion, personally, as a judge, but that Pensati would not be qualified to be a court-appointed attorney on this case, as she doesn't have the experience or qualifications for the court to appoint her. That he would not be able to claim that he had incompetent counsel later if he was found guilty. Ultimately, Lonnie decided to keep her on. Pensati said that Oscar was a sociopathic liar trying to get his own deal with prosecutors in his murder case. She said he claimed he ran her law office and acted as an attorney, which she says is obviously insane to believe. She said she wanted to hire him and give him a chance, but when he started using drugs and alcohol, she let him go. She never thought he would retaliate because she felt a twice convicted child molester had good judgment and was of sound mind.
I'm just like, oh, Louisa.
Louisa, what are you doing?
Oh, there's a lot of questions about what is she doing with her life.
Well, guess what?
I mean,
because there's more.
Oh, no.
November 2015, another delaying complication arose and once again involved her. This time, the prosecution pointed out that she was about to be suspended from practicing law because she was unable to produce proof that she had passed the multi-state professional responsibility exam, a requirement of her 2013 probation that she was hit with by the California State Bar. If she didn't show proof she had taken and passed the exam, she would be suspended as of November 16th, 2015. Pensati made a request to delay the stay on the suspension, and that was pending state bar approval at that time. So a follow-up hearing had to happen on November 16th, and the request to delay the suspension was still pending, but so was the answer to whether or not she'd pass the exam, which she only wrote the week before. Way to leave it till the last minute. Again, I want to remind you, she was put on probation in 2013. This happens November 2015. You waited till the week before that deadline to write that test, you boob. So Seymour Amster then finally said to the judge, I think I need to replace Louisa with another attorney. Of course, Louisa was the one that brought him in. He had to mutiny. He brought in defense attorney Dale Atherton, someone he had worked with before. And finally, the court date was finally set for February 16th, 2016. Jury selection begins. Monique Alexander's family came to court every day. Lots of the families did. Prosecution took a month to wrap up their case. Defense took a month. So many things. Here's something interesting. Seymour Amster just didn't come to the verdict reading. When asked where he was, he said he needed to help a friend who was having trouble at the DMV. It's so wild. So the jury took 2 days to deliberate. One by one, of course, they found Lonnie guilty on all 10 charges of murder and guilty also on the one charge of attempted murder, which was, of course, for Anitria. So there was, of course, the fact that all of them had Lonnie's DNA on them, or the zip dye in Janicia's case. And those who didn't, there was, of course, the ballistics from the bullets of the gun that all matched his gun. The defense had tried to argue there could have been a mystery man involved. The jury didn't buy it. 1 week after conviction, the penalty phase began. That lasted a month. New evidence came forward, possibly linking him to the deaths of an additional 4 women. Three of them were discovered when searching unsolved homicides and missing persons from cases from 1976, when, I want to remind you, he returned to LA from Germany. And the 4th was linked to evidence found in the post-arrest search of his garage. Prosecution has not included them did not include them in the proceedings prior. They didn't want to hold up the trial any further. It had been almost 6 years. So they just were going forward because they were hoping he was going to get justice anyway. So now his first murder, they thought, that happened in 1984. Now they think his first murder was a woman named Sharon Alicia Dismuke, who was 21, which was a year and a half before Deborah Jackson, which was have been 1984. But again, there's also the argument it could have been 1982. There's also the argument it could have been 1976. So who knows? One thing about Sharon's story, which is awful, was that she was found in a abandoned gas station bathroom on the floor by the toilet. She had been shot in the chest, again, as always. And there was an anonymous telephone call reporting a dead body at the location. Guess what? Again, the next one, Inez Warren, 1988, an anonymous tipster made a call from a public phone telling the police, again, that they had found a body. It's crazy to me, again, that this was clearly his MO, but they never picked up on it until after all of this had happened. There was also a 3rd victim's body that was never found. Police believe he was still responsible for her because they did find evidence in his garage connecting it. That was Alea Marshall. And then finally, the 4th was Georgia May Thomas. That was 2000. She was 43 at the time. They found her because they found the gun used in her killing behind a false wall in Lonnie's garage. Also, Georgia, her sister, testified that they definitely knew each other and that Vivian, her sister, had dropped her off at the house many times. So again, it just felt like a no-brainer. On May 26th, obviously, Ingrid W. took the stand. She told the full story. There was some debate about whether or not they were going to let that in. They did. Seymour Amster found out from the judge that the jury apparently found him very intimidating. So he had the new guy do his closing statements. The new guy read a poem, which is preposterous if you ask me. Then he tried to convince the jury just not to choose the death penalty. That was it. Just don't choose the death penalty. But on August 17th, 2016, Lonnie Franklin Jr., who was 64 at the time, was admitted to San Quentin's death row because he was, of course, recommended to have the death penalty, and the judge agreed. So he was charged with the death penalty. He lived the rest of his life on death row because on March 28th, 2020, he was found dead in his prison cell. Autopsy results, it's vague. It seems that they were never fully released, but all of the sources say it was legitimately natural causes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my report on the Grim Sleeper.
Lauren motherfucking Ash. I thank you for your research. Thank you for taking us all on a very
Wild ride.
deeply disturbing journey.
Deeply. One of the worst.
Yeah. You have really come into your own in this researching game.
Thank you.
And I just could not be prouder.
I learned it from you.
I
learned it from watching you.
I have so many. I love that the thing I want to say, like, I just am in so much. There's just so much I can't even fathom about this. The fact that he makes anonymous calls to like make sure they find what he's done just so that he gets credit without getting credit. You know what I mean? Just so people can acknowledge what he's done and see his work is really gross to me, because he can't just show them the photographs like he likes to show his friends.
I know, but then he doesn't also do it every time. Like his MO is so it's
There's
really bizarre.
There's zero chance he took a 13-year break.
I agree. Zero chance.
There have to be so many, and I wish that we knew what else he did, like what he changed or something, because obviously there was no DNA, or they would have found the DNA in other cases or something, you would think.
Well, we still might. Who knows?
Great point. I also want to say I made a joke earlier, and I love that it stuck with me, about John's incredible pizza. And I'm just going to say, I agree and applaud them for their choice of helping the police to collect this man's DNA. So I just want people to know and not be angry at me and thinking, I was like, oh, and they infringe on rights. No, I wanted them to. Take this man's DNA, do what you need to do, because this was a terrible, terrible man. I want to, there's just so many things. My brain is all over the place. I love Pam Brooks. I love the attitude that she brought. I love that in a court of law, a lawyer threw a pen. Like, I love that in a court of law, a lawyer read a poem. I mean, there's a lot there. And this man disturbs me to no end. Yeah. And I cannot believe I'd never heard of him until you told me about it.
I know.
Like, how the fact that there are like 30 women still unidentified and nobody's talking about it. Like, I know. I cannot. I cannot. There's a lot of things I'd like to say. We have really pushed the limits on time.
The longest we've ever gone.
But again, I just want to say your research, you lady, are top notch.
Thank you.
I mean, dear God, I'm stunned by so much of this. I barely know what to say. Do you want to tell the people what the next episode is? Do you want me to do it? How would you like to work this?
I'll do it.
Okay. Do you want me to lead you in?
Sure.
Okay. On the next episode of True Crime and Cocktails Famous Fatalities Edition,
our April Patreon pick, Natalie Holloway.
Oh, now if you want to say in the next episode, visit patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails. We have all kinds of fun over there. There are bonus episodes. You're going to love it. So if you think that nearly 3 hours of these ding-a-lings a week is not enough for you, Patreon could be the place for you. So check us out over there. Since you're online anyway, visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Give us a follow at True Crime and Cocktails, or on Twitter at Not Detectives. And remember, you can check out the case file for this episode and all of the previous episodes we have done on our website at truecrimeandcocktails.com. Lauren, would you like to say goodnight to the people?
Good night, everybody.
Good night.